If he wanted him specifically for help teaching Naruto, then there was really only one reason it would be for. I won't be able to help him control the Kyuubi, Daiki denied instantly, shaking his head. Just because he knew in a possible future that Naruto would earn his respect in full and they would become friends and could reveal the threat of Madara the Jubi and Kagaya, did not mean he would be able to get Kurama to play ball. It would be the opposite. In fact, I'm afraid, Isobu spoke up, prideful as my sibling is, Kurama would take that information and stubbornly dig his feet in all the more and make it even harder. My own presence in actuality would be more detrimental if we revealed the truth and believe we are just trying to manipulate him. At best, they could use his ego to get a bit of help from him if they left out the parts about him becoming friends with Naruto. But it would be an uneasy truce liable to break at any moment. No, the best thing to do would be to let their relationship play out for the most part and not interfere. I figured as much, Jiraiya shrugged. You can't reach him how to tame the Kyuubi just because you're friends with the Sanbi. That's two completely different situations. But you can teach him how to use his abilities, right? That he could do. I can teach him the basics of the chakra cloaks and give him some advice, but any special abilities I get from the Sanbi are much different from his. Daiki responded, nodding even if his words hitched for a moment in the middle. You can call me the Sanbi to others and not say my name, you know, I won't get offended, Isobu told him. He simply shrugged and didn't reply. Good, you're learning, Isobu commented approvingly. That'll do, Jiraiya grinned. Besides, the kid needs to know there isn't anything wrong with him being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He got the role forced on him, but you chose it willingly. Getting to understand that will go a long way to helping him out, I think, and that you aren't all like that sand kid. Ah yes, Gaara. He had actually forgotten Raccoon Boy had all but traumatized Naruto when they met after the prelims. That said, this was a chance for him to get his hands on something else he needed. Or at least the beginnings of it. Fine, if the old man okays it. I've got a big mission soon, you know, Daiki agreed, but on one condition. Naruto pissed me off the last time we saw each other, after all, even after I busted my ass saving his team and healing Sakura. Greedy aren't ya? Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Fine, what do you want in return? Senjutsu. He said simply. Ho? Hiruzen raised an eyebrow in interest. Jiraiya on the other hand, narrowed his eyes. Yeah, no kid, you're talented for sure. And even learning about that at your age is impressive. But no, there's no way you can manage it, he refuted instantly. Besides, I can't teach it, only the toads can, and signing the contract isn't something that can be done all willy-nilly. Not for me, Daiki replied, standing up and dusting off his clothes. I already have a summoning contract after all. Way better than toads, by the way. I want you to get your summons to teach my boss summon how to use senjutsu. After all, he didn't have the time to be learning it right now. Nor was he anywhere near as predisposed to it as Naruto. But Shiramaru was an entirely different matter and should be well capable of learning it. That big guy had spent over 50 years in the same exact spot disguised as a castle. He had the whole sitting still thing down to an art form at this point. And he had no doubt his boss summon could learn senjutsu. And then later down the line, when Daiki had more free time, he could learn it himself from Shiramaru. Oh yeah, the chameleons, I forgot you had that contract. Jiraiya cocked his head to the side and pursed his lips. That might be different, but I'd still need to ask. I can't promise it'll work out or anything. Well, I'm not going anywhere right now, am I? Daiki replied. Or, am I? He looked to the Hokage. I will delay the mission until tomorrow, Sarutobi replied. But, even if this does not work out the way you desire, you still have to agree to train Naruto. Daiki shrugged. Fine with me, that won't take long anyway. He replied in turn. It wasn't exactly rocket science. A couple hours should be enough to beat it into the idiot's head. Though it did bring up a question. Why do you not know senjutsu, old man? He asked. Hiruzen merely laughed lightly. Oh, my summons were incapable of learning the art, as was I. I'm afraid I'm just not very compatible with the art, he replied, truly regrettable. But not everyone is capable of it. Not even Tobirama-sensei was capable of harnessing the power. And even Minato-kun failed to grasp the art in full. Jiraiya is the only one alive in this day and age capable of using it in combat as far as we humans go to my knowledge. Man, when it first came up, senjutsu was played up as an incredibly powerful art that even the best of the best struggled with. The fact that not even the old man or the second could manage it, really hit that factor home for him. Shit, would he even be capable of it? Yeah, I've been at it decades, kid, and I've still not mastered it. Jiraiya snorted when he saw Daiki's eyes widen. You sure you want to try for it? I hear you're pretty good at seals. Why not have me teach you a few instead? Tempting, but no, nah, long shot it might be, but even if it's hard, I want to at least attempt it. He replied. In the end, he simply wasn't a little bitch and would as always, believe in the heart of the grind to see him through. Fair enough kid, Jiraiya nodded. Give me a minute and I'll bring one of the sages here, he said, before closing his eyes and clasping his hands together. Daiki's eyes widened. While he hadn't at all trained with Isogu's sensory abilities yet, he was still well capable of seeing chakra with his eyes. And as soon as he closed his eyes and clasped his hands together, Jiraiya began to focus an absolutely monstrous amount of chakra into his clasped hands. And by monstrous, he meant monstrous. It built up, and up and up. Until within Jiraiya's hands was a chakra amount that surpassed his own full capacity. Jiraiya's eyes snapped open about 30 seconds later and he crouched down to slam his hands onto the ground. Summoning jutsu, he declared, and a massive puff of smoke erupted from the ground where his hands made contact. What in tarnation? A croaky, elderly male voice cried out from within the smoke. Jiraiya boy, the heck you doin' summoning me for? When the huge tower of smoke dissipated a few moments later, it was to reveal a tiny little green toad standing bipedal. A small brown cloak covering its form and with bushy gray eyebrows over its eyes. No doubt about it, it was Pa, one of the two sages of the Toad Summons clan and the one who taught Naruto how to harness senjutsu. And to summon him, Jiraiya just spent nearly 10 times as much chakra as it took Daiki himself to summon Shiramaru. Holy shit man. Sorry Pa. Jiraiya gave the small toad a sheepish smile. Rubbing the back of his head, something came up I need to talk to you about. Better be good boya. I was just bout to sit down to Ma's maggot stew, Pa huffed. Then took his glowing yellow eyes off of the white-haired Sanin and looked at Daiki, raised a single bushy brow, before looking to Hiruzen. Well, if it isn't young Hiruzen-chan, it's been a while since I seen you, monkey boy. It's nice to see you again, Pa. Hiruzen inclined his head respectfully, though, I'm hardly a young boy anymore. Bah, still a whippersnapper to me boy, Pa snorted, waving him off. Now then, who's this lad then? Quite the powerful chakra this one has for being but a tadpole. The old toad turned his attention back to Daiki and scrutinized him with ancient eyes. How old was Pa again? This brat's the reason I summoned you, Pa. Jiraiya waved his arm at the boy. Kid's a weirdo. He's a perfect Jinchuriki. Sealed the Sanbi in himself a few months ago and got its allegiance. I want his help with teaching Naruto how to use the Kyuubi's power properly, but he wants something in return. Kyuubi Jinchuriki, huh? I see. Pa clicked his tongue, and didn't comment at all on his own status. But his gaze did sharpen and Daiki felt a pressure settle on his shoulders. Well then boy, what you want? Can't be something as simple as signing the contract. Jiraiya boy could handle that and would have brought out Bunta boy if not instead of me. I want you to teach my boss summon how to use senjutsu, Daiki replied bluntly. There was no point dancing around the issue. Either the old toad would do it, or he wouldn't, simple as that. Pa stared at him silently for a moment, before promptly, snorting, that's so tadpole. He chortled, and why is that? Because I want to learn senjutsu myself, Daiki shrugged. I've not got the time for it right now, nor am I ready for it myself. That's for sure, Pa snorted. I can tell that from just a mere glance at ya, boy. A long ways off. Annoying, but hardly enough to stop him in his tracks. Yeah, like I said. Daiki rolled his eyes. My summons though, specifically the boss, are a completely different matter though. And I'll be able to get their help to learn it myself later. Pa hummed and scrutinized him keenly for a moment. And what summon clan do you represent then boy? The Chameleon clan. Daiki replied. Pa blinked. Oh, that brings me back. He shook his head. I did hear young Shiramaru finally returned to his clan after gaining a new summoner. You must be something special to catch the eye of that stubborn little lizard. Young Shiramaru was over 100 years old. Well, he's definitely not allied with the snakes, at least, not after the falling out he had with his dear whippersnapper of a papa little Manda boy, HMPH, Pa huffed, taking his attention off of Daiki to look at Jiraiya and Hiruzen. What say you two lads? Can you speak for the lad's character? Do you think he's worthy of it? Jiraiya shrugged, which was fair. They barely knew each other. The white-haired man looked to his elderly teacher. The human one. Well, if it helps Pa, I've chosen the boy specifically to become the next Hokage, the successor to Minato. Hiruzen revealed. Pa's eyes widened and he whipped his small head around to stare at Daiki in shock. Minato-chan's successor. I see, he nodded. Very well boy. I will contact the Chameleon clan and give the offer to Shiramaru boy. I won't promise anything though. It will be down to the lad's own talent. He'll manage it just fine. Daiki smirked. He had full confidence in his summons. The chameleons were just that badass. He would be much further behind than he was right now if not for them. Once Pa left back home to enjoy his maggot stew, it was time for Daiki to leave the Hokage training ground behind for the first time in a week. It was the first time he saw sunlight in that week, and would have strained his eyes a bit, if not for the fact his eyes were special and saw bright lights every second of every day regardless of if it was day or not. Sadly, while Daiki would have loved to head home for a little bit, he had a deal to pay out on. And so out into the forests with Jiraiya he went, to meet a familiar spiky-haired blonde. Ero Sennin, where the hell have you been? Naruto, right in the middle of a set of push-ups with multiple bags of what appeared to be sand tied all over his body began to demand as they appeared, only to pause and blink when he saw Daiki with him. The hell are you doing here? He asked, pushing himself up and crossing his arms. He'd discarded his orange jacket and so was only wearing a mesh shirt and orange pants, which meant he could see much of his bare torso. The boy, while short, was packed with rigid, powerful muscle. Not as powerful and glorious as his own of course, but the hard training the boy put himself through showed. Though, the sandbags were much less efficient than his own method of weight training. I went looking for this brat here, shrimpy brat, Jiraiya shrugged. I figured he'd be able to teach you something much better than me. Huh? The hell you on about? Naruto scowled, crossing his arms. It was easy to see the boy was still upset with him about his attitude regarding Lee. I thought you were some super sanin like that snake-faced bastard? Some great shinobi you are if you need some kid my own age to teach me something. Ah, shut up kid, I'm the gallant Jiraiya. You won't ever find another shinobi as badass and cool as me. Jiraiya waved the boy off. The little muscle head beside me just has something in common with you that I don't. Naruto snorted at him. Yeah, and what's that pervert? I'm a Jinchuriki like you. Daiki cut in. Time was wasting after all. I'm here to teach you how to use the Kyuubi's chakra properly. Naruto's bright blue eyes instantly widened in horror. You? No? He swallowed heavily, his shoulders trembling for a moment. Wait, like me? You have a monster in you too? In response, Daiki scoffed. The Biju aren't monsters, moron. They're huge masses of chakra that people stuffed in guys like you to make super shinobi that can use their power, he replied. In that respect we're nothing alike. You're a pansy that got the strongest of them all handed to you at birth, whereas I went out and found the Sanbi myself and sealed it in myself. He'd already long since played a situation like this out in his head before, and he'd come to the simple realization that angering Naruto instead of letting him wallow in his self-pity over it, would be the best course of action. Jiraiya face palmed. What? Naruto gaped at him. Why would you do that? How did you do that? For once, he'd rendered Naruto quiet through sheer shock. Why wouldn't I? Daiki crossed his arms and smirked cockily. Being a Jinchuriki makes me superior to any normal ninja. Not only do I get the Sanbi's special abilities and he has a ton, but I also heal faster, my chakra grows massively and recovers faster and I can draw on its strength. Did you think I was talking bullshit when I said I could easily crush all of you back at the prelims? Naruto outright grimaced. Just for power? Everyone has always hated me. I've been alone all this time with no parents or anything because of the Kyuubi inside me, and you want the same thing, just for power? Oh, grow up Naruto, seriously, it's for your own good. Daiki shot back. Why the hell would you care what your lessers think of you? The only ones that cared at all were weaklings and civilians. An easy trade-off in my opinion. You got more chakra than 10,000 of those weaklings put together. You got more chakra than me. Do you understand how absurd that is? Kids, calm down a bit won't you? Jiraiya sighed and felt the need to step in. This really wasn't what I had in mind. But no, Daiki wasn't having it. He wanted him to help Naruto. He would. And the blonde would be all the better off for it, both physically and mentally. Hell, he'd be happier in the end. Buzz off old man, go set up a barrier to stop anyone from sensing chakra within this area and leave us to it. Daiki jutted his chin at him. I'll be making Naruto see sense, but if anyone senses the Kyuubi's chakra they'll freak out. Jiraiya hesitated, but Daiki narrowed his eyes at him and then with a mental tug, he called upon his closet ally's power. Almost casually, a bubbling cloak of sizzling red chakra formed around his body, splitting into 3 huge, thick tails at his back and waving languidly in the air. He was making a point. Jiraiya grimaced, understanding. Fine, but I won't be far. He conceded and disappeared in a blur using a shunshin. Only then did Naruto speak up. That chakra, like it? Daiki spread his arms wide and invitingly, massive grin on his face. This is what is called the version 1 Biju cloak. It's the step up from that little aura you can call on right now. You can draw right up to as many tails as your Biju has. In your case, that would be 9. As he finished speaking, he saw the air ripple above them as a clear translucent barrier formed. I don't even know what's going on, but I can tell it's super strong, Naruto grudgingly admitted. I still don't get it, Daiki. Sure, it's strong, but why would you want it? Don't you remember, the Kyuubi attacked the village? It killed so many people. It's why I grew up hated and without parents. I don't want to use its power unless I need to. And, Daiki replied, the Kyuubi killed my parents too. My dad died in its initial attack and my mom 2 years later because of its chakra that infected her. But you don't see me whining about it. That did it. Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. It killed your parents, and you don't care? He demanded, baring his teeth. Don't put words in my mouth, loser, Daiki scoffed at him. I didn't say I didn't care. I just don't blame the fox for it. You don't blame it? How? It killed them? Naruto snarled, rage beginning to overtake him, his eyes bleeding red and his pups elongating into feral slits. As expected, Naruto, because of his own lack of parents, was very big on the whole family thing. Him besmirching his own in any way made him seem entitled even if they were dead. How predictable. We're shinobi, idiot, Daiki shot back. We fight, we kill and we die. If you decided to become a shinobi and chase after being the Hokage hat without even realizing that simple fact, then you're even further below me than I thought. Naruto trembled in his spot, sheer anger enveloping his body in a literal red haze of chakra. Just a little bit more. It's no wonder the old man has decided to make me the next Hokage after him while you aren't even a footnote despite having the strongest being in the world to draw strength from. Daiki jutted his chin out arrogantly and looked down on the boy. And thus, it began. Liar! A beastly roar tore its way from Naruto's throat and the blonde rushed him in a blur of speed most jonin would have trouble keeping up with. And was promptly batted aside by a single tail that whipped out faster than the blonde could react, sending him flying through multiple trees. The blonde was buried under multiple large fallen trees within moments. A pile of trees that were promptly blown high into the air as if they were made of paper when the boy shot to his feet and spread his arms wide. With a snarl, Naruto once again shot towards Daiki in a blur of speed that tore a trench in the ground at his feet. Not even a blink of an eye later, the boy was upon him and lashing out with a rapid barrage of clawed swipes, punches and kicks, each one capable of shattering a boulder. Yet with ease, Daiki parried his blows, hopped over them, dodged with the smallest of motions. Look at you, Daiki laughed as he spun around Naruto's next blow and buried his elbow in the blonde's face, breaking his nose with an audible crunch and sending him tumbling backwards in multiple rolls. Only the very bare minimum of the Kyuubi's chakra and you're already at the point where you'd demolish Sasuke, your big rival, yet you whine about it so much, he goaded. Shut up! Naruto bounced to his feet, nose already healed and roared. The sheer power put into his voice conjured a pure-on shock wave that blasted out towards him, tearing up thick trees over 50 feet tall as if they were little sticks caught in a hurricane. Only to be rent asunder as he swiped one of his 3 chakra tails up over his head and down in a blade-like motion. Really, Naruto, a shockwave against me? That's my thing, bro. Daiki laughed at him. Naruto growled, bringing his hands up into a familiar cross-seal, shadow clone jutsu. He shouted and a moment later, 3 clones enshrouded with the same sizzling red chakra cloak puffed into existence beside him. And together they rushed him, and Daiki rushed them. His 3 tails tore out from behind and, flashing through the air like a trio of crimson yondaimis and smashed into the 3 clones before they could even make it halfway towards him. And then he was physically in Naruto's face, faster than he himself could react to, and his hand wrapped around the blonde's throat and hefted him up into the air. And then, he began draining the boy's chakra, 3-fold. With his chakra armor, the chakra-absorbing seal added to his dimension force seal and the chakra absorption jutsu he'd stolen from that sunglasses-wearing fool that simped for Orochimaru. Naruto's eyes widened and he began to trash in his grip, arms and legs kicking out violently, his sizzling red cloak of chakra burning at his own. But managing nothing in the end, before long, the boy went limp in his grip and the cloak of chakra around him dwindled away bit by bit. "Store that in the seal, will you?" he said inwardly. He already had quite the collection of Sasuke's chakra from all the times they'd sparred. Now, he had Naruto's as well, and quite a lot of it actually, and he'd take the time to cultivate both for his own uses. "Already on it," Isobu replied. "Brilliant. Sorry about this, Naruto, but it's necessary." He apologized to the blonde boy in his grip, the boy's bright blue eyes dim and half-lidded. He was on the edge of losing consciousness. In the first place, the likelihood of Naruto having any true mental defenses were slim at best. Sasuke slipped right on in with just the Sharingan after all. But it was better to be safe than sorry. Besides, this little slapathon they just had proved the point of his strength and why Jinchuriki were superior than normal people. He narrowed his eyes onto Naruto's own and with his eyes, slipped into his mind, projecting his consciousness into his own just as he did before with Anko. And moments later, Daiki left the physical world behind and found himself standing ankle-deep in murky water, within a huge metallic hallway. Beside him, Naruto sat on his backside in the water, staring up at him in shock. "So this is your seal, huh?" Daiki commented, looking around idly. Should have guessed the guy who came up with the sexy jutsu would have a gutter for a mind. "This is my seal thing. How did you get in here?" The blonde, now much more subdued after the ass-kicking he'd received, asked in shock. I've got special eyes, better than Sasuke's by the way," he replied and added, "Now, let's go talk to a big fluffy fox, shall we?" He grinned down at Naruto, holding his hand out for him to take it. Despite the slight mocking tone he'd given about the state of Naruto's mindscape, soulscape, whatever it was scape, Daiki was astounded by it. He had to shut off his ability to see chakra, simply because the sheer amount of it permeating even the outer halls away from the main area where the nine-tailed Biju was located, was almost blinding. The wall, the pipes running along the walls, the air, the water he stood upon. The saturation of chakra dwarfed his own and then some, that was for sure. Not only that, but the sheer amount of yang chakra in comparison to yin is absurd. Isobu commented, "It's no wonder the boy's healing factor is so powerful and how he stands above his peers of his year beyond the Uchiha boy and yourself physically. I wonder if the Yondaime Hokage took this into account? It does explain a few things." Daiki mused inwardly as he traversed the seal halls. It was not like Naruto did not train. In fact, out of their graduating class, the only people that trained harder than the blonde were Sasuke and Daiki himself. But the quality of his training was abysmal. He was mostly self-taught and he made his own training up as he went. And while it worked, it was inefficient compared to his own training or the likes Rock Lee went through. Yet, canonically, by the time Naruto had returned from his trip to find Tsunade, he was physically superior to Sasuke, who was at that point on par with Rock Lee speed-wise. That did not make sense. Despite his hard efforts, Naruto was not geared towards being a speedster. He was geared to being a juggernaut. Yes, it seems this overabundance of yang chakra is helping his musculature develop and strengthen at a much greater rate than usual, offsetting his subpar training, Isobu agreed. I hazard to guess that even if he did not train, as he aged towards adulthood he would still passively become stronger from it. That was kind of bullshit and that was coming from him. I agree, though I find it even more stupefying how such potential has been squandered, Isobu hummed. If he had proper training from his younger years like much of his peers, I have no doubts that he would already be on the level of a Kage. That thought almost made Daiki sneer in disgust. That was tantamount to heresy as far as he was concerned, and why kindness could also be a weakness. The old man was far too soft in this case. He could still have been kind while being strict with Naruto, and in his place, Daiki would have installed the proper method of the grind in him from a young age and created a super shinobi that could have rivaled Hashirama without calling on his Biju by time he was 15. To be perfectly honest, he couldn't even say he wouldn't have pulled a Danzo with him. To be precise, if he only had the knowledge the old man had to go on currently and not his meta-knowledge, he would have grabbed 2 Uchiha traitors who were close, there were plenty at the time, and then kill one of them, forcing the other to awaken the Mangekyo, and then killed him and taken them as well. Then implanted them within Naruto and had him trained to subdue Kurama with his eyes and force his compliance and make Naruto a pseudo-perfect Jinchuriki. Ruthless pragmatism at its finest, Isobu huffed. I do not condone that idea at all. But from the view of a Hokage, that would be the most optimal choice and create a shinobi only the likes of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha could defeat, and that's generously assuming he had not yet reached his prime yet. Daiki wasn't able to ponder on that though any longer, because Naruto, who had been uncharacteristically silent for the last little bit, finally regained at least a bit of his bearings. What did you mean by what you said earlier? The blonde asked, frowning at him thoughtfully. How you don't blame the stupid fox? Just that, he shrugged. Let me ask you something in return, Naruto. Why do you think the Kyuubi attacked the leaf? How do you think it even got in the vicinity of the leaf village? It walked, or ran? Naruto replied with a shrug after a moment of thinking and apparently coming up blank. Haha, no, Daiki snorted. Back then our village had the Yondaime and the old man Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Danzo, a guy you've likely never heard of, and more. As powerful as the Kyuubi is, far stronger than any of them alone. Power alone doesn't decide everything, and if it just approached our village, it would have been spotted from miles away, and all our strongest shinobi would have mobilized and attacked it long before it got to our village and sealed it. And that's not taking into account every other village coveting the Kyuubi's power and attacking it as well. Naruto's face scrunched up and he could practically see the rusty gears inside his head turning. So how did it get to our village then? He asked. Because it broke out of its last Jinchuriki, Daiki revealed bluntly. You didn't think you were the first Jinchuriki of it, did you? Naruto stopped, sapphire blue eyes shooting wide open in absolute shock. What? He gaped. There's been more. Yup, to be exact there were two before you. The first being the wife of the Shodem Hokage. Daiki continued on. Long ago, she sealed it inside herself after it was subdued by the Shodem. This is crazy. Naruto shook his head. So the Kyuubi attacked the village back then? Haha, no, Daiki repeated with another snort. See, this village was founded by the Shodem and a guy called Madara Uchiha. Uchiha? Like Sasuke? Naruto tilted his head. Yeah, Daiki nodded. Back then, they got into a big-ass fight and Madara left the village and went on a rampage across the continent. The Shodem Hokage went to stop him and they got into a big fight, during which Madara enslaved the Kyuubi that was just minding its own business and hypnotized it with his Sharingan and used it to fight the Shodem Hokage. Suffice to say, Madara lost the fight and the Shodem decided that the Kyuubi was too strong to let just walk around, so he subdued it and had his wife seal it inside herself. He then went and hunted down the other 8 Biju, beat the crap out of them and sealed them away as well, and then gifted them to the other villages for some hippie piece crap. Well, except the Ichibi, the one in that Gaara kid. The sand had already subdued that one themselves. Huh? Naruto gaped at him. What? No, wait, what? I don't understand, why do that? For peace apparently, Daiki shrugged. Like I said before, Jinchuriki like us are superior to normal ninja. We're basically, when trained right, super ninja. The Shodem was so goddamn strong everyone was afraid of him, so he thought gifting them all the Biju to make their own super ninja to act as weapons would make them feel more secure, I think. Honestly, why he gave the Biju out was a mystery to him, even after seeing it with his own eyes. He understood he wanted peaceful coexistence, but he didn't understand why he gave the Biju out beyond him having them at the time. Did he hunt the other Biju because he thought they were too powerful to let roam, or because he wanted to use them as a gift? That part wasn't expanded on at all. Personally, I'm not his biggest fan, Isobu commented. I don't know what he was thinking. But, I was just relaxing in a nice big lake. Sleeping actually when he came out of nowhere, dragged me out with that giant wood golem thing of his, beat me up, wrapped me up in giant wooden tendrils and had his wife seal me, in a jar of all things. Yeah, that was the problem with hippies. They never saw anything beyond the vision in front of them, and they were always hypocrites in the end. He could appreciate Hashirama's vision and desires, but not his methods. Quite frankly, the man had no idea what he was doing. If he wanted peace, Daiki had better ideas. In his place, he would have had Madara enslave the other cage with his eyes like he did Yagura, or how Obito did, either or. He would have had them preach friendly relations with Konoha and run the propaganda for them. Which would have also placated Madara as well, at least partially. And if he personally believed the Biju were too powerful to let roam, he wouldn't have sealed them in breakable objects or people. He would have created large sealed spaces, other dimensions, which he knew Mito should have been capable of from his own understanding of sealing, and let them live out their lives there. It would still be imprisoning them, but it would be better than the cramped ways inside a person and used as a weapon. We would have still resented you for subjecting us to your will, but again, a much better plan, I do admit. Isobu mused. Frankly, if things played out that way, this entire continent would most likely have become Konoha, unified under a single banner, even if it would not be perfect. Daiki shrugged inwardly. He never thought it would be. Perfection did not exist after all. If it did, he would already be it. Sure. Isobu snorted. I still don't get it. If what you say is right, then the reason you don't blame the Kyuubi is, Naruto rambled. 'Cause I'd do the exact same thing if I was just enslaved, imprisoned and used as a goddamn weapon just for existing. Daiki cut him off, then smirked. In fact, the Kyuubi is kinder than me, 'cause in its place, I would have just aimed down with my strongest attack and blown up the entire village, and I'll tell you this. The Kyuubi is well capable of creating an attack like that within 10 or so seconds at most, if that. Honestly, he was lowballing Kurama's ability there. He could probably do it in 3. 2. Isobu helpfully added. Naruto's expression twisted into something, crushed. That was the only way he could describe it. He looked like Daiki had just stolen his crush and fucked her 6 ways to Sunday, then dropped her pleasure-broken self at his feet covered and filled with cum. Pleasant. Isobu helpfully added once more. Daiki shrugged. It painted a vivid imagery at least. Of course, Daiki continued, this doesn't really help you all that much, Naruto. The Kyuubi fucking hates us, and if it ever does get out of you, it'll probably massacre most of Konoha in retribution, so good luck with that, he added. Because that needed to be said. Naruto could sympathize with Kurama all he wanted, but he had to understand that Kurama hated them all for a very viable and understandable reason. And unless Naruto punched him with the power of friendship and became buddy-buddy with him, Kurama would sooner bijudama them than help them. Then why are we going to meet the fox? He asked, eyes lost. 'Cause I want to see what the big bad Kyuubi is like up close and personal and get a feel for its strength. Daiki lied with a shrug, even if it's only at half strength 'cause of the Yondaime. Wait, what? Oh, did you not know that? Daiki raised his eyebrows at the blonde. 'Cause you were just a baby. It seems the Yondaime wasn't sure you could contain the full power of the Kyuubi, so he used a forbidden jutsu called the Reaper Death Seal that sealed away half of the Kyuubi's strength inside his own body at the cost of his life. That was it at only half. Naruto's eyes flew wide open and he sputtered. Naruto, a deep voice echoed ominously throughout the mindscape as they entered the main area of the seal. Your patheticness knows no bounds. The Jinchuriki of me. The mighty 9 tails being manhandled by a mere 3 tails Jinchuriki, shameful. A massive gigantic gate loomed at the other side of the huge, dreary room. And within it, a tantic orange-furred fox with blazing, malice-filled eyes glared out in contempt. Yet made no move to stand up as they approached. The Kyuubi lay there, head atop its paws, and saw no need to rise up to greet them. Kurama's position alone indicated how far below him he believed they were. Yes, that would be right. While we have no genders physically, our personalities reflect them in a way. I would say only Matabi leans towards being female out of us 9. Isobu agreed. Kurama's words at least seemed to snap Naruto out of his funk. Ah, shut up you stupid fox. The blonde shouted, I was using your power, which I didn't ask for by the way, and I still lost. It wasn't just me, we both got our butts kicked. That's just because of how pathetic you are at using not only your own strength but mine. Kurama scoffed, if it were me, I would have crushed them. Big talk for a dumb fox stuck in a cage, Naruto snapped back. Your pathetic retorts show just how little you know, disgraceful, Kurama sniffed in disdain. Then those blazing crimson red eyes settled on Daiki. Now why did you come, boy? Do you think I'll happily serve this little fool like that pathetic weakling Sanbi does you? Just because you have a slight understanding of where I stand? Hardly. If you heard what I said to Naruto, you already know that I know you won't, not that I blame you. I wouldn't be too happy in your place either. Daiki snorted himself. No, I just came because I wanted to see the one that killed my parents and see just how powerful you really are. Kurama did not react to his words much, beyond a slight tightening of the fur around his eyes. But after a moment of his words hanging in the air, the titanic 9-tailed fox slowly stood up, rising to his full height within the seal, each of his tails a match for Manda in size and length fanning out behind him. Is that so? Well then, let me give you just a taste of it, boy. The air seemed to still at Kurama's words, and then a searing red wave of pressure erupted from the seal, illuminating everything within the area with a deep dark crimson glow. And Daiki's eyes widened as he felt it, Naruto falling to his backside with a gasp as it rushed over them. It was like the world itself was pressing down upon his shoulders, and a hate-fueled bloodlust that made Orochimaru's own feel like that of a newborn babe's in comparison to the snake Sannin's own swept into his very bones. Lesser shinobi would lock up and die in fright from the sheer killing intent alone within the chakra pressing down upon him. And the sheer force behind it could probably kill the average newly graduated genin. It was a truly absurd power that even just a mere flare of dwarfed that of Isobu's own, even with Daiki's added on top. It was not even a contest. This was the Kyuubi, the being that could flatten mountains with a swing of a single tail and cause a tsunami with another. Pure primordial power given life and physical form. The greater part of a god, even in his weakened state. Daiki couldn't stop the cold sweat that erupted from his pores. The power behind Kurama truly was insane. And just as suddenly as it started, the wave of chakra stopped and Daiki released a breath he didn't know he was holding. It really was just a taste, as Kurama said, but the sheer power behind it was mind-boggling. So vast, that even with the ability to sense chakra he gained from Isobu, he couldn't see an end to it. The hell was that for you, stupid fox? Naruto surged to his feet, shaking his head and baring his fist angrily at Kurama. Just 'cause you're in a shitty situation doesn't mean you do crap like that. If nothing else, the blonde's mental fortitude was something else. Naive and ignorant he might have been and childish as hell, but there was no denying his courage and backbone. Naruto, do not think just because this boy has told you a small fraction of what led us to this moment, that we are in any way friends, Kurama scoffed. You are nothing, less than nothing. You are weak and pathetic and can do nothing without me. The only thing that saves you from me is this seal between us. Make no mistake though, I will one day escape this prison and crush you and everything you love, well, what little of it you do, because don't ever forget, I know the true you and not that pathetic veneer you show off for those foolish humans to get their attention and acknowledgement. Naruto growled, bastard fox, and here I was beginning to sympathize with you a bit. He bit out, I'm not gonna let that happen. I'm gonna be the Hokage that surpasses all the other Hokage, and since you couldn't beat the Yondaime, no way you'll beat me. Try beating the one beside you first. He's the next Hokage after all. I sensed no lies in his words. Kurama mocked the blonde. It's a good thing he is not my Jinchuriki or I'd have a very hard time getting out. Thankfully I got you, a weakling. Naruto visibly grimaced and grit his teeth, but for once didn't shout back. Probably because he didn't know what to say though more than anything else. Not that he blamed him, he just had his dream mocked and rubbed in his face, by the very being that caused him all the pain he'd suffered in his life. At least as far as he knew. Boy, Kurama then turned his attention to Daiki once more. I will not apologize for your parents, because I am not sorry. You should feel proud though, that the being they felt was me. The mightiest and strongest of all. That's fine, Daiki shrugged, crossing his arms over his chest, gleaming scarlet meeting crimson red. Like I said, I don't blame you for it. It's just the way this world works, but I'll say one thing back and keep it in mind. You won't be the strongest of the Biju for long. I'll make sure Isobu surpasses you. Kurama blinked. I see, so it's like that, the fool. The giant fox shook his head, then erupted into great peals of laughter, pure amusement vibrating the very air. A goal even more foolish than Naruto wanting to become Hokage, good luck with that. And then he roared and a wave of pressure swept over him and the world warped around him. Suddenly, he was back in the physical world, Naruto held aloft in his hand by the throat. Naruto's eyes regained their focus and he kicked wildly in his grip, forcing the boy to drop him. The blonde landed on his backside and rubbed at his throat. That was interesting. Daiki mused inwardly, the thick tails of chakra behind him flicking back and forth through the air idly. Quite, I was not expecting Kurama to be so accommodating. Isobu agreed. He afforded you, while not respect, at least a smidgen of courtesy in the matter of your parents. Yeah, he was not at all expecting Kurama's, while not comforting words or an apology, but at least acknowledgement of him and the death of his parents at his hands. Yes, I believe your words to Naruto and not blaming him for his part in things and even believing him to be in the right with his actions earned you a bit of goodwill with my sibling, Isobu mused. I don't doubt he would still kill you without a second thought if it meant gaining his freedom, but it is a start I believe towards gaining his cooperation. Huh. And there he was not even aiming for that. He didn't think it would be at all that simple and wouldn't amount to much beyond a tiny starting point, but it was a gain without going for it in the first place that he would happily accept. A cough drew him from his thoughts and he looked down to see the boy with a grimace on his face and looking up at him. "Were you telling the truth?" Naruto asked. "About being the next Hokage?" "Ah, right." Naruto hadn't really believed him, but Kurama confirmed his words. "Yeah," Daiki confirmed bluntly, "because of what led me to meeting and sealing the Sanbi inside me. The old man believes I'd be a good candidate. Especially since with the full power of the Sanbi, I can fight on the level of the Hokage and protect the village. There's loads of requirements for being the Hokage, but the most important is being strong enough to do the job." Naruto visibly grit his teeth and stood up, hands clenching into fists. "I thought there wasn't any shortcuts to being Hokage, yet you're telling me if I could use the fox's power, the old man would think of letting me be it?" he asked. Daiki scoffed. "Hell no," he replied flatly. "Naruto, I told you there's more to it. You don't need to be the smartest or most knowledgeable to be Hokage, and while strength is the most important, it has to be accompanied with loyalty to the village and the maturity to know what being Hokage actually means." He uncrossed his arms and stared the boy directly in the eyes. "You're not stupid, Naruto, but you're ignorant and you refuse to compromise. You don't understand the first thing about being a ninja, never mind being the Hokage," he explained. "At your core, you're too soft and you don't have the mindset needed to do what's right for the village above all else, which the Hokage needs." What do you mean I don't understand the first thing about being a ninja?" Naruto's hands flexed. Daiki sighed. He couldn't blame him for not knowing. Daiki himself learned this lesson from Naruto himself when he was older after all. To be a ninja is to endure. That's what it means. You can't even truly endure being yourself. You constantly want attention, you lie awake at night wishing you had parents to love you, you yearn for affection. And you despair at being who you are and being a Jinchuriki, Daiki told him and lifted a single hand and pointed at him, a finger of chakra extending from his own to poke him directly on the chest, over his heart. "Here's a little advice from me to you. Get over it. You've got this far without parents, haven't you? You're strong, you don't need them. If you want love, don't look to the past for something that can't be. Look to the future, find someone else to love you. Accept that the world is cruel and that people die. You can rage and cry about it, but then you have to move on." With a thought, he dispelled the chakra cloak from around his body and stepped up to the blonde, his image in Daiki's vision being superseded by an older one in a red cloak for a brief moment, and most importantly, he said as he thought about the Naruto whom he in another life had eagerly watched and held great love for. "Yeah?" Naruto trembled under his gaze, such was the weight of this moment. "Be proud of who you are. There's nothing wrong with being a Jinchuriki, even if you put aside what I told you earlier. Without you, nobody could hold back the Kyuubi and it would have destroyed the Leaf Village. You protected this village, so hold your head high." Daiki smirked. "Wear it like a crown. Something you alone accomplished that nobody else did, and it can't be used to hurt you. And always remember who you are. You're Naruto Uzumaki, the savior of the leaf, the Jinchuriki of the strongest Biju, and above all else an enduring ninja that no matter how many times you get knocked flat on your ass, will always stand back up." Daiki, Naruto bit his lip and tears began to bud in the corner of his eyes. "Right. I get you, I think." Daiki clapped him on the shoulder and turned away, walking a few steps forward and reaching within himself once more. A familiar bubbling red cloak of chakra with 3 tails sprung into existence around him instantly. "Now that we've got the heavy emotional crap out of the way, let's get down to business." Daiki looked over his shoulder with a smirk. "Bring out the Kyuubi's chakra. Draw on it till you can form at least 1 tail. I'm going to teach you how to use it properly. Oh, and use your sexy jutsu while you're at it." Naruto blinked at his words, the heavy emotion and tears in his gaze disappearing through the power of sheer confusion. Again. Naruto, or rather, Naruko at the moment, growled as she punched out her fist, launching a massive claw of chakra over 20 feet in size through the air, smashing through a boulder and pulverizing it to dust. Again. Daiki ordered. "Fine," she growled as she reeled back in the chakra arm and then thrust out her other hand and launched another one that tore through a series of trees. Honestly, the area they were training in after an hour had passed looked like a war zone. Currently, Daiki was having the blonde run through some basic drills with using the one-tailed cloak she had managed to form around herself with only a little bit of complaint at the fox inside her. Kurama, it seemed, was feeling a little bit more generous at the moment and let her pull on the one-tailed cloak without too much of a fuss. Though Daiki was betting that was more because his pride was hurt with how easily Daiki had slapped his Jinchuriki around earlier. Hey, others' pride was so useful to use to his benefit sometimes. Naruto snapped the chakra arm back a moment later and turned around to glare at him, crimson red eyes having replaced sapphire blue. Why'd I gotta keep doing this? It's easy, I can already do it, she growled at him, before crossing her arms under her large, shape and bodaciously naked bust. And you still haven't answered why I have to train in my sexy jutsu, you damn pervert. Because eye candy, he thought with a snort, idly glancing over the nude blonde. Taking in her slim, stomach, full thighs, flared hips leading into a gorgeous backside, lusciously thick thighs and absolutely massive tits that might even have surpassed Anko's, because you're pretty good at using this technique on the fly and holding it alongside the chakra cloak, will make it much easier for you to use jutsu on the fly, he explained, which was true. He could have had him transform into anything or really use any other jutsu, and I'm making you repeat it over and over because it's annoying you. And you need to learn how to suppress the anger that's seeping into you from the Kyuubi's chakra. The agitation in the busty blonde was plain to see and in stark contrast to Daiki himself, who was casually sitting atop a rock behind where the blonde was training, head propped on his fist and his chakra cloak peaceful swaying around him. Naruto's eyes twitched. That doesn't mean I need to use my sexy jutsu. I could have transformed into anybody else, she huffed. You're just a perv, Daiki. You already admitted to having the hots for my sexy jutsu back during the prelims, remember? Oh, right. He had, hadn't he? You did. Isobu snorted in amusement. Daiki shrugged. You caught me, he admitted, but since I'm spending my time training you and not doing my own training, I should at least get something nice to look at. Man, it really is too bad you weren't born a girl. I knew it, Naruto crowed. You're just a little pervert like Ero Sennin. Hell no, I'm not some little pervert, Daiki scoffed. That title belonged to someone like Ebisu. Oh yeah? Naruto challenged and spread her arms, letting her huge bare breasts bounce deliciously in front of him and draw his eyes to her cherry pink little nipples. Then what are you? I'm a Giga Chad pervert, he replied proudly. I can't believe you're the next Hokage. Naruto slumped her head in defeat. The world isn't fair at all. I mean, can you really complain? Daiki pointed out with a snort. You're getting private training from the next Hokage himself, just because you're an utter babe in this form. It's just a transformation. I'm a guy, Naruto rolled her yes. You're leering at another guy right now. Not right now, I'm not. Right now you're a chick, he denied. Honestly, it's doing its intended purpose anyway. Didn't you make this technique to take advantage of perverts like you claim I am? Why not take advantage of me more for your own benefit? Well yeah, but not like this, Naruto shrugged. I don't even get why you're so at ease with it. In return, Daiki shrugged, just taking in what might have been, he replied, you're kind of annoying normally, but if you were born a girl and looked like this naturally, I'd have already seduced you. Now, Naruto not being actually real? That was the world not being fair. Oh screw you. Naruto rolled her eyes. Interesting, he had distracted her enough she was more indignant than agitated and angry. As expected, she was pretty well equipped to handling Kurama's chakra. The problem with what he noted originally was that Jiraiya jumped ahead too quickly with her training. Instead of having him master the lower stages, he just loosened the seal and jumped to the higher stages. If only. Daiki smirked at her. Naruto's currently red eyes opened wide and her cheeks flushed. Not like that, you pervert. She screamed and punched out at him, a massive red chakra claw shooting out towards him. Only to get torn apart as a tail swept down over his head and tore it apart, while Daiki slipped off the rock he was sitting on to stand on his feet. Calm down, Naruto, it was just a joke. Stop calling me that. The blonde huffed, cheeks blazing so dark he could easily notice them through the bubbling cloak of chakra around her body. Nah, I'm not calling you Naruto while you're like this, Daiki laughed, but how about I make it up to you and teach you a jutsu? All embarrassment was immediately forgotten. A jutsu? Her head perked up, twin tails swaying noticeably with the motion. God, that was sexy. Truly the world was unfair. Yeah, I've got a good one in mind for you. Daiki stepped forward. I'm pretty sure you've got an affinity for the wind element, so I'll teach you the wind style. Drilling air bullet. One of her biggest problems in the other timeline was her sheer lack of long-range techniques. That would go a long way, with more control over the chakra cloak to dealing with that. Affinity? Naruto's head tilted to the side, confused. And he lost her? Don't worry about it, He walked past her, spanking her on the ass as he did, making the currently naked bodacious blonde yelp in shock. "Let me just show you the jutsu real quick." "Did you just freaking spank me, you perv?" Naruto gaped at him and he swerved to the side to avoid another chakra claw aimed at his back. "Why yes he did." Hours later, when the sun hung low in the horizon and the sky turned a dusky red, Daiki found himself standing in the Hokage's office. Two pairs of eyes giving him dry gazes, and had been doing so for the last minute. "Seriously, kid?" Jiraiya asked, voice deadpan. "Don't act like you wouldn't have asked them same, honestly I bet you already have." Daiki smirked at him knowingly, a smirk which widened when Jiraiya grimaced and looked away. "Besides, while I was doing it for the eye candy, I wasn't lying. Holding a technique while using his Jinchuriki powers will seriously help him in the long run and up his chakra control for sure. Honestly, I do believe I should have seen this coming." Hiruzen shook his head. "Really, if I didn't already know of your parents, Daiki-kun, I would have assumed Jiraiya impregnated some poor girl and spawned you." "As if he wishes he could spawn someone as awesome me," Daiki snorted. "Hey now sensei, that's a low blow. You know I've got a seal to make sure something like that doesn't happen." Jiraiya huffed. "Anyway, I'm still not sure that was the best way to go about it, kid. You were a bit too blunt and he's still not really mastered the summoning jutsu either, so giving him another jutsu to learn, an elemental one at that, is a bit iffy. I'm thinking learning more control of the Kyuubi's chakra will help with that, and so will the jutsu itself. The more he learns the better honestly, and it'll translate into his other jutsu skills while at it. Or at least it does for me." Daiki shrugged. "But don't go doing something stupid like loosening his seal anytime soon. I've given him a bit of a reality check, but Naruto is still way too emotional to be able to filter it all out. Honestly, for the next 2 weeks up to the final round, you should have him using the one-tailed cloak form constantly and practicing with his jutsu. Just be careful though, cuz he'll be liable to lashing out if you piss him off enough right now, and he should be tough enough with it to tear apart your average jonin." "Very well, you are more or less the only reputable master of the subject at hand. We've never trained a Jinchuriki to use their power after all," Sarutobi mused, puffing on his pipe. "Jiraiya, do as Daiki says, have him work on using the cloak as he did today and that shockwave attack, as well as the summoning jutsu and the drilling air bullet." Yeah, Jiraiya waved him off. "I gotcha, sensei. Anyway, if that's all, I think I'll go keep an eye on the kid right now. I'm kinda leery of leaving him to himself right now while he's using that chakra." "That would be for the best," Sarutobi nodded. "Besides, I have things to talk about with Daiki in private anyway." "Ah, I see how it is," Jiraiya snorted, nodding his head. "Little secret powwow with your new and all-time favorite student. Favoritism hurts, you know, sensei." "Yes, as many women who have complained about a certain student of mine peeking on them in the hot springs and not being arrested have attested to." Sarutobi deadpanned back. "Huh, wonder who did that. Sounds like a cool guy." Jiraiya laughed and proceeded to disappear with a shunshin, hastily leaving the premises and the subject at hand behind. "That boy will never grow up," Sarutobi snorted, then turned his attention to Daiki. "So, let's get down to business, shall we?" Daiki shrugged. "Sure. I've decided, as you know, that Anko will be your guard and escort to the Mist Village," he stated. "You will be leaving tomorrow, at which time is your own choice. How you approach the negotiations is up to you, though do try not to offend the Mist too much." "Don't worry about it, I've had 2 weeks to plan, old man," Daiki replied. "I can't guarantee they'll be all in for an alliance, but I'm pretty sure they'll at least not be aggressive towards us. Not with what he'd be giving back to them already with a possible offer. And the problems that stem from them he could use to throw shade at them in return for any claims they'd make. From Rin to Raiga and even Ao." "It's good to see you're confident," the old man hummed. "I'm at least confident enough myself in your strength to confirm your safety in the mission." Left unsaid was that the Mist was currently the weakest of the 5 great villages. Only an idiot would pick a fight with the strongest in their position, even if they weren't aware of Konoha's precarious position. "Good luck, Daiki-kun." Sarutobi smiled at him warmly. "No need for luck when I'm me, but I'll take it anyway." Daiki laughed lightly. "Though, there is one thing I want to ask you, old man, before I leave," he said after a moment, his face turning serious. "Oh?" Sarutobi raised an eyebrow at him. Daiki eyed the liver spots on the old man's face for a moment, before speaking. "If you had the chance to reverse your age and become young again, would you take it?" he asked. Over the last 2 weeks, he gathered up enough chakra to restore the man to his prime and still leave quite a bit in the tank for his own usage if needed. I would not. The old man denied, immediately making the boy blink. You wouldn't? He gaped. I would not, Sarutobi confirmed, closing his eyes for a moment, before opening them again to look into Daiki's own. My life has been hard and I have many regrets. I have lost a son and a daughter-in-law. I have lost my wife and too many members of this village to count. I will not ask why you are asking me this, Daiki-kun, but I will say this. Despite those regrets, I am happy with my life and want to live it to the natural conclusion, at which point I will join my wife, my lost children and the leaves who have fallen from this great towering tree in the next world. Oh, Daiki wasn't sure how to respond, so he didn't. It was regrettable, since the old man back in his prime would be an absolute monster. But he would respect his decision. By the way, Daiki-kun, Sarutobi's voice broke him from his thoughts and looked up, only realizing then that the man's words had caused him to look down at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Here. A scroll fell from the old man's sleeve and was tossed towards the teen, who caught it easily. What's this? He asked. You'll be on the road for a few days, so you can get some reading done in the meantime in preparation. Sarutobi replied. That scroll contains the exercises you will need to go through to train with both the earth and fire element. Just because you are on a mission does not mean your beloved grind can come to a halt, no. Daiki couldn't stop his lips twitching back up into a smile. Definitely not, that's heresy after all. His grind list was never ending. It seemed that every single time Daiki managed to whittle down his list to nothing, more popped up for him to get right back on the saddle and get back to it. It sure is great to be me. Daiki whistled a jaunty tune as he made his way back towards his home, taking a leisurely stroll through the village streets for once instead of blitzing across the rooftops. It was nice to take it slow every now and then, before returning to going fast. Though, he was also a little amused. Thanks to Isobu's memories of Yagura's training and the scrolls he just got from the old man, there was a good chance he was going to master every other element first before his natural lightning affinity. Granted, thanks to one of the jutsu the old man taught him during their training, he had a great idea on how to go about mastering it. And even if it didn't, it would be a step towards creating his very own S-rank jutsu. Even if he was copying Sasuke at the brass tacks of it, it was fine though, he'd never know. I suppose since the old man showed me them, it'll make for a good excuse to learn the Chidori and Rasengan. He mused. While he didn't know the instructions for learning the Chidori, he already had a rough idea of how it worked thanks to his eyes when he saw the old man perform it. He supposed he could also see about learning Shadow of the Dancing Leaf as well. He'd seen multiple uses of it already since the beginning of the Chunin exams. Speaking of Lee, Daiki stopped in his tracks, a frown splaying across his lip. Perhaps he should go see him before he left the village for his mission. Angry as he was at him for being a fool, he still couldn't help but feel for him. Once upon a time, Rock Lee and his never-give-up attitude had been someone he looked up to. Between him and Naruto, his love of the grind had taken shape, and inspiration from them had been what got him going to the gym in his old life. The anger he'd felt over his foolishness and still did not outweigh the good things for him in the end. Suffice to say, Daiki decided to make his way towards the hospital before heading home and pay Rock Lee a visit. But as he approached the hospital, something stood out. Or rather, someone. They were a block away from the hospital, atop a large building overlooking the hospital, and so well hidden that most wouldn't even notice them. But there was no hiding from the Scarlet Eye. Not unless you were behind some crazy-ass Uzumaki seals designed to block out even the Byakugan at least. It was a familiar short redhead with a gourd atop his back, standing the building and looking directly at the hospital, arms crossed, a frown on his face. His gaze was intense, teal eyes filled with a hunger for blood. Oh right, Gaara was obsessed with killing Lee for a bit because Guy stopped him during the exams, wasn't he? Daiki mused. Now, what to do about that? Should he confront him, or let things play out? Actually, if he remembered right, Gaara almost did manage to assassinate Lee and was only foiled luckily by Naruto and Shikamaru, before Guy turned up to stop Gaara from killing those two. The question was if Guy was actually there all the time and ready to step in at a moment's notice, or not. Daiki wanted to believe he was, since letting a foreign shinobi get into the hospital so easily was the height of incompetence, and that was just silly considering there was an entire barrier over the village with the barrier team monitoring the village 24/7. While it was impossible for them to scrutinize every little thing, They for sure would have around-the-clock surveillance on a foreign Jinchuriki. Actually, weird. Naruto knew about Gaara being a Jinchuriki. He wasn't supposed to learn that until Gaara tried to kill Lee, which was the literal day before the third round. Has it already happened? Daiki wondered. If it did though, why was Gaara still obsessing over Lee? Well, either way, letting things play out at this point wouldn't give him the same results, so he may as well confront the other Jinchuriki. Sighing in annoyance, Daiki hopped up onto the roofs and made his way over towards Gaara, not bothering to hide his presence. Gaara's eyes roamed from the hospital building and landed on Daiki as he landed on the roof. As he did, Daiki noticed, the whites of his eyes were bloodshot. "You!" Gaara all but growled, black ringed eyes narrowing at him and a spike of killing intent rising in the air. The redhead's bloodlust hung heavily in the air. "Sup, raccoon boy?" Daiki greeted him with a smirk. "You shouldn't be here," he added, his hands casually resting in his pockets. A simple glance out of the side of his eye was enough to confirm his previous thoughts were right. With his telescopic vision that could see clearly up to 10 miles away, he could spot Rock Lee in his hospital room, doing one-handed, handstand push-ups. Daiki resisted the urge to sigh. As much as he respected the hell out of grinding like that even in his state, he was just doing more damage to himself like that. "You are the one who'd threatened my existence before, after boasting of how you could defeat all the trash alongside me." Gaara's gaze and bloodlust sharpened noticeably. "That I am," Daiki nodded. "Sorry about that. I was in a bit of a bad mood, you see. A friend of mine, the guy you fought, crippled himself just to try and beat a weakling like you, so it pissed me off a bit." If possible, the bloodlust in the air spiked, anger filling it, and within all the time it took to blink, a large spear of sand shot through the air towards him, erupting from Gaara's back. It didn't even make contact, the sand falling to the ground harmlessly as his armor sucked the chakra out of it. "Having performance issues?" Daiki taunted with a smirk. "HMPH, absorbing chakra, how quaint," Gaara scoffed, yet despite his words, his bloodlust did not lessen. "I will kill you regardless of your little tricks." "Tricks are for kids," Daiki snorted, "and it's impossible for you to kill me. You're just a failure of a Jinchuriki after all, not like me. I'm better than you in every single way." Gaara's gaze tightened. "Do not speak, as if you know me, just because you know what I am," he bit out, lifting his hands. "You are just a mere human, I am the demon of the sand." He raised both hands up, his chakra spiking and sand erupted from the gourd on his back, swelling up into the air above them. But with how blatant his bloodlust was, it was easy to predict such an action, especially with Gaara's prior track record. That was why, the split moments his chakras spiked, lightning sparked into existence around Daiki's body and he moved. Gaara's sand jumped to his defense, it was not fast enough. With the lightning chakra mode, his speed was well a match for Rock Lee when he was using the gates. If not faster. Gaara only had time for his eyes to widen in shock, before Daiki's palm smashed into his face and bodily lifted him up into the air, before slamming him back down onto the rooftop. Only then did the sand reach him, switching from defense to offense, tens of dozens of sand spikes aiming to impale him from every angle. But just like before, the second they got within the vicinity of his body, they shriveled away as the chakra was absorbed from them. Gaara's eyes were wide with horror and fear. "No?" The boy snarled around the palm in his face and clenched his fists, the sand that had been scattered, filling with chakra once more and leaping to his aid. "Stop, or I'll kill you," Daiki said simply, and it halted. It was not a threat in his voice, it was a promise. And Gaara froze. That was Gaara's biggest problem really. At this point in time, without relying on the strength of the One Tail, he was powerless. And against someone that knew his weaknesses like him and could exploit them, he was a sitting duck. The turtle-shaped pauldron atop his shoulder had been specifically created to counter Gaara. And that was not taking into account his armor, the seal on his palm that could absorb chakra and the jutsu he'd stolen for himself that let him absorb chakra. He literally had 4 different methods of absorbing chakra and rendering Gaara's greatest weapon and defense useless before him. Quite simply, Daiki was Gaara's worst possible matchup. And unless he unleashed Shukaku, there was nothing he could do against him. "Just as I told your sister, you really are a failure of a Jinchuriki," Daiki shook his head. "It's sad really, the second I invalidate your sand, you're literally nothing. Without your sand, your average genin could kick your ass around." "You," Gaara trailed off, just staring up at him. I will not let you steal my existence. I don't want it, I wouldn't even be bothering with you if you weren't obsessing over killing a friend of mine. Daiki replied with a snort. All you are, is a failure of a Jinchuriki that's too lonely and hurt to pull yourself out of your self-pity. This was a bit of a delicate situation. As such he handled it with all the grace of a bull in a china shop. As he always did. I'm not lonely, Gaara all but snarled. The emotionless facade he liked to portray nowhere in sight. You know nothing. I know everything, Daiki countered with a smirk, allowing the lightning armor to fade from around his body, and he felt a great relief as he did. The damage it had done to his body already beginning to heal. After all, unlike you, I'm perfect. He boasted and reached deep within and pulled. Sizzling red chakra exploded into existence around his form in place of the lightning armor, three tails lazily swinging in the air behind him. You, Gaara's eyes widened in shock, you're just like me? You're a demon as well? No, I'm a Jinchuriki. We're Jinchuriki, Daiki corrected, then shook his head. What the hell is up with everyone thinking the Biju are demons? Demons are pussy-ass weaklings compared to them. Why the hell would you boast about being a weakling like that? Say it with me, Gaara. We're Jinchuriki. We're way scarier than any pansy-ass demon. Honestly, it was getting almost insulting at this point. A different name changes nothing, I am treated as a demon, thus I am. Gaara replied, we are demons to the world. A world that will shun us and try to steal our very lives. I will not let my existence be snuffed. Daiki rolled his eyes, letting go of Gaara's face and stepping back. Your dad really did you dirty, huh? He shook his head, about as expected. The man is a complete clown after all, as I already told your sister. Gaara stared up into the sky, confused. Why did you let me go? He asked, instead of commenting on what he said about Rasa the clown cage. Why not? Like I told you, you're no threat to me, Daiki replied, then sighed, honestly, at most I'm disappointed in how weak you are. We Jinchuriki are superior to normal ninja, but you've done it wrong. You can't control Shukaku at all and rely on its power over using it to bolster your own. You might have the weakest of the Biju, but that doesn't mean you should be a weakling. Gaara winced at his words, clutching at his head and grimaced noticeably. Guess he didn't like my words, huh? Daiki smirked, then held up a single hand, chakra glowing along his fingertips. Shut the hell up, Shukaku, or I'll seal you off entirely. We're having a conversation here, he threatened. Gaara winced again, before his expression eased up. For all Shukaku played up the insane act, it was just that, an act. And it knew better than to risk its influence over its host. You made mother quiet? Gaara gave him a gobsmacked look. I could make Shukaku quiet forever if you want, Daiki offered, despite himself. Even with his disappointment in Gaara's strength, it didn't change the guy was done fucking dirty and couldn't even sleep because of Shukaku. That was bound to give anyone a few screws loose, and Shukaku's not your mother. Your mother is dead, she died bringing you into this world, so don't disrespect her like that. Gaara looked as if Daiki just slapped him, which technically, he kinda did not long just with his full palm. Daiki sighed, look, I get it. Your life sucks and has sucked for a long time. Your mom died giving birth to you. Your dad stuck a Biju in you that you never wanted. He forced your siblings not to interact with you. Tried to have you killed a bunch of times and everyone avoided you thinking you were a demon. He rattled off and actually found himself wincing as he spoke it aloud. Pity for the other boy welling up in him. It must have been lonely and hard. What, how do you? Gaara's voice came out in a whisper. Everyone in your village knows what happened to you basically, so anyone outside the village can get the information easily from their loose lips, Daiki responded. Then crouched down to be eye level with the boy who had been too caught in the discussion to stand back up. But see, despite your shitty dad, you're not actually alone. You still have siblings who love you, for all that they're absolutely terrified of you at the same time. Lies, those weaklings hate me, Gaara responded instantly. No, they don't, Daiki flatly replied. At the very least, Tamari doesn't hate you. If she hated you, she wouldn't have turned up at my room to scope me out and make threats after the second round of the exams. Well, he was embellishing a little, but he did know for a fact Tamari loved her little brother and would give her life for him even now. A weakling like Tamari threatened you? Gaara's head tilted to the side, and he asked in a small voice, but, you're so strong and powerful. You defeated me with ease and my sister is a gnat compared to me. Like I said, just because she's scared of you because you always threaten to kill her, doesn't mean she doesn't love you, Daiki replied, and leaned forward, laying his hand on the boy's shoulder. I mean, think back, Has there even been a time where your siblings treated you badly even before you went psycho-murderer? Or was it all your father forcing them? Gaara looked away, unable to meet his eyes. For what it's worth, there's nothing wrong with hating the people who made your life hell, Daiki said in consolation, but blaming those who didn't is just doing the same thing others did to you. And you clearly don't like it. Honestly, while I can't understand things from your view, since I willingly became a Jinchuriki, I sympathize with you. And really, if you want to talk to someone about it, you should go find Naruto, because he was treated a lot like you growing up. The blonde boy? Gaara's non-existent eyebrows furrowed, the one who said he has a demon, a Biju as well. So that did happen. Yup, and he's a whiny mess over it just like you. Daiki snorted. I'll tell you the same thing I told him when I was teaching him how to use his power not long ago. Be proud of who and what you are. You should be. Being a Jinchuriki makes you inherently superior to normal ninja from the get-go. And if you are proud of it and wear like an armor, it can never be used to hurt you. Don't brandish it like a sword. Gaara did not reply, but a storm of emotion swirled in his teal eyes. Go home, Gaara. Spend some time with your siblings while you're away from your father, and for once in your life, make your own decisions. Daiki finished, standing back up. As he did, Gaara slowly did so as well. I need to think, he said, before bringing his hands up into a single hand seal and disappearing in a swirl of sand. As he left, Daiki rubbed his head and sighed in annoyance. What the hell am I? The Jinchuriki therapist? He groaned. He could only hope Gaara did take his words to heart. Because Naruto was far stronger than he was in the other timeline right now and could freely use the one-tailed cloak thanks to him. Gaara might just die if they fought this time around. And even if they didn't, Daiki wouldn't be able to pull his punches the next time around. Because he'd be slaughtering his way through every single invader that he saw during the invasion. After consulting with Kurama, Daiki expected to depart Naruto's mindscape and re-enter the physical world. However, he found himself standing in a vast expanse of gentle golden light. Before him stood a stunning red-haired woman with a small smile etched on her face. Hello, Daiki-kun, isn't it? Kushina Uzumaki greeted him warmly. He blinked. This place, he recognized it. It was where Naruto had met his mother in the future for the first time in the other timeline. Ah, yeah, he nodded in reply, a bit tongue-tied. And not just because of his sudden appearance here, but to be straight, she was a sight to behold. Despite the unflattering attire, Kushina's voluptuous figure was impossible to conceal. Her womanly hips, thick and shapely thighs, and plump, round posterior stretched the limits of the dress, while her ample bosom remained high, proud, and alluring. Kushina caught his eyes admiring her body and rolled her eyes. Right, you were a little of a perv, weren't you? She snorted, amused. Still, it's nice to meet you, Daiki-kun. Daiki coughed, and with a sheepish smile met her eyes. Sorry about that, it was just instinct. He apologized, and quickly began to run damage control. Who are you? And where am I? Not that I'm complaining about suddenly being face to face with a beauty like you, but I'm kind of confused here. And I don't think you're the Kyuubi's real form or something stupid like that. That furball wishes, Kushina snorted, but aren't you a little charmer? But to be exact, my name is Kushina Uzumaki, and to make a long story short, well, let's just say I could bring you here because of your chakra and leave it at that right now. I just wanted to take the chance to thank you for what you're doing for Naruto. She inclined her head in gratitude towards him, causing Daiki to bite down on his lip, observing her ample bosom bouncing within her blouse. Naruto's mom, huh? Sealed inside another part of his seal? Interesting, he instead said, and he did find that part interesting. He shook his head. Well, don't worry about it. Me and Naruto are kind of friends, and he doesn't deserve the hate he gets, and that he should be a lot prouder of who he is. I know, I was watching after all, Kushina giggled, raising her head, pretty eyes sparkling. He really needed to hear those words though, so I'm thankful regardless. Like I said, don't mention it, Daiki waved her off. Honestly, I should be the one thankful. If he really was born a girl and took after you, I'd have been love-struck, especially if as a girl she had such beautiful hair. Her hair was a magnificent sight to behold, and cascaded down to her ankles like a shimmering red curtain. Kushina ran her fingers through her luscious locks, a playful smile dancing on her lips. You do have a certain boldness about you, don't you? You know, I used to hate my hair, she chuckled, reminiscing. I used to loathe it actually, you know. The way people would tease me relentlessly. Until I decided to take matters into my own hands and give them a taste of their own medicine, of course. If it was girls, they were probably just jealous, Daiki replied, though he only knew of boys that bullied her, which brought a chuckle from him. Still, beat the crap out of them, did you? Sounds about what I expected from Naruto's mother. Her cheeks flushed lightly, but she laughed in return. We Uzumaki are natural-born hotheads after all, she replied, but, putting that aside, Daiki-kun, since I had the chance to bring you here, I took it. I wanted to thank you. You already did though. Daiki pointed out. No, I mean actually thank you. Give something in return. Kushina shook her head. If there's something I can do for you, don't hesitate to ask. You're pretty good at fuinjutsu, right? Maybe I can teach you some seals or give you some tips? We should have a few hours here at least by my reckoning. Anything, huh? Despite himself, Daiki's eyes flickered to her voluptuous breasts stretching out her dress, which Kushina didn't miss at all. You really are a little perv, aren't you, kid? She snorted, pure amusement in her tone. A teasing grin spreading across her face. If that's what you want though, I don't mind, heck it could be fun. Wait, seriously? Daiki goggled, but, what about my husband? Kushina cut him off. I'm not actually Kushina Uzumaki, you know. Well, I am, but I'm not. I'm just a remnant of her, like a shadow clone. I'm not the real one. So it's not like she's actually cheating on him. And as much as I love my son, it is awful boring in here just sitting and waiting. As she spoke, the voluptuous beauty walked over to him, full womanly hips swaying. She stopped in front of him, grinning teasingly. If you want a piece of this, come take it, she taunted, cupping her large, juicy breasts and jostling them at him. Or would you rather I teach you that fuinjutsu instead? Fuck it, fine with me. Daiki shrugged. He couldn't believe this was happening, but he sure as hell wasn't going to say no. He couldn't resist the temptation of her voluptuous body any longer. He grabbed her big breast, sinking his fingers into the plump flesh, eliciting a soft moan from her lips. His other hand greedily explored the curve of her hips, before cupping her ass. The massive, springy cheek filled his palm perfectly, making him want to squeeze and knead it until she begged for more. He was going to absolutely destroy this woman while he had the chance. He crushed his lips against hers, his tongue pushing past her lips and intertwining with hers in a heated battle of dominance. She moaned into his mouth as her hands instinctively gripped his broad shoulders, feeling a rush of desire wash over her. His kiss was intense and passionate, leaving her breathless and wanting more. What a really bold kid, Kushina thought lightheadedly. Daiki wasn't going to waste any of the limited time he had with the beautiful MILF that was Kushina Uzumaki. His hands left her tits and ass and grasped her dress, and then with a powerful yank of his hands as he pulled away from the kiss. A loud ripping sound echoed throughout the golden world around them as he tore her dress right off, leaving her nude as the day she was born, except for the sandals she was wearing. Damn, Daiki swallowed, taking in her amazing naked body. Kushina licked her lips seductively and gazed at him with an amorous look. You want a taste of this, big boy? She purred, her fingers moving to caress her voluptuous, creamy breasts, adorned with delectable pink nipples. She shifted her hips and spread her legs, showing off her mesmerizing, pink, virgin-like slit that looked like it had never been touched, never mind given birth. Her thick thighs flexed as she spun around, revealing her curvaceous, irresistible body and enormous, plump buttocks just begging to be spanked. Fuck yeah, I do. Daiki licked his own lips hungrily as he stared at her. Well, come get it, like I said, Kushina laughed teasingly, tugging on her nipples and jostling her huge tits, though, it's not quite fair that you're still dressed and I'm not. He grinned, guess I'm a bit overdressed. He wasted no time in pulling his clothing off. Kushina's eyes widened in awe as his pants and boxers came off, revealing his massive, throbbing cock. It stood tall and proud, begging for attention. Oh my god, she moaned. How have you been hiding that beast? You're packing some serious heat down there. She licked her lips hungrily, eager to feel every inch of him inside her. She'd never seen anything even close to that big before. This really would be fun, wouldn't it? She stepped towards him, her voluptuous breasts pressed tight against his chest. With one hand, she grabbed hold of his mammoth member and gazed at it in amazement. It's so thick, Kushina moaned as her fingers failed to encircle it, her eyes filled with lust. I can't wait to feel this inside of me. You're going to wreck me with this monster. Fuck yeah, I am, Daiki sneered lustfully, reaching behind her to spank one of her ass cheeks hard, making the large bouncy cheek bounce and jiggle. A moan leaving Kushina's mouth. I'm gonna make you squeal, he promised. Oh yeah? Kushina moaned out. Sounds like a fun time, stud. Gonna fuck my big ass silly with this huge cock of yours? She licked the side of his jaw, while shaking her massive ass cheeks invitingly, tempting him to spank her again, which he did. The loud clap of his hand meeting her ass echoing loudly and drawing another moan from the older woman. Damn right, he growled, reaching up to place his hand atop her head, and then force her down to her knees, making her face come level to his fat testicles, his huge cock towering over her head and making her go cross-eyed as she looked up at it. But first you're gonna worship this cock with your pretty little mouth, baby. Kushina was transfixed by the sight of his enormous shaft. Oh my, it's so thick and veiny, she purred, admiring every inch of it. She wasted no time in exploring his manhood, tracing the outline with her delicate fingers, while her tongue swirled teasingly around her lips. She eagerly took his balls into her mouth, savoring the weight and texture of them, as she considered what she wanted to do next. She slowly ran her tongue up his entire length, reveling in the salty taste and velvety texture of his skin, before taking his pulsing head into her mouth and giving it a playful nibble. She made sure to look him straight in the eyes as she did it, relishing the way he shuddered with pleasure at her touch. Daiki chuckled as he gazed at the gorgeous MILF slurping on his thick shaft. You're into some kinky stuff, aren't you? He asked. Kushina grinned mischievously as she pulled away from his throbbing cock with a loud slurping sound. You know what, baby? My husband couldn't handle me the way you're about to. He was too gentle in bed, never gave me the rough pounding I craved, she replied as she took both of her hands off of his cock. But you. Oh, you're going to make me scream like a filthy little slut, aren't you? She moaned as rose higher up on her knees and she wrapped her massive soft tits around his shaft, sliding them up and down with depraved enthusiasm. Daiki was consumed with lust as she spoke, and he grabbed her by the hair. She began to stroke his cock with her breasts, and he thrust upwards with force, shoving his thick member into her mouth. He took control and made her wet tongue slide up and down his shaft as she squeezed his flesh between her huge tits and began thrusting roughly into her mouth. Loud wet slurping gags echoed for a good 10 seconds before he pulled back, leaving her gasping, spittle dripping from between her lips to land on her large, bouncy tits. Rough like this, you mean? Daiki sneered lustfully as he grasped his cock at the base and slapped it across her face demeaningly. Oh yeah, just like that, baby, Kushina moaned, nodding her head vigorously, reaching up to roughly tug on her own nipples and nuzzle her face against the cock he was slapping her with. As he looked down at her, seeing one of the most beautiful women, if not the most beautiful, on her knees before him, hips gyrating, tugging on her huge breasts and looking up at him with a lewd look on her face. A thrill ran up Daiki's spine and ignited his instincts. He looked down at her, her snatch dripping with lust, and he smirked. Let's take this up a notch, huh? He chuckled to himself, electricity sparking to life along his fingers. Kushina's hands hungrily squeezed her massive, pillowy breasts when she felt an electrifying touch that sent shivers through her body. What's this? She moaned, her confusion quickly giving way to pleasure as those charged fingers clamped down on her nipples and pinched. The electrifying sensation pulsed through her body, igniting every pleasure receptor at once. She exploded with pleasure, her body convulsing and her voice screaming in ecstasy. Her delicious fat tits bouncing wildly as she experienced the most powerful orgasm of her life. Her essence gushing out of her core in a glorious squirting fountain. Kushina dropped to the ground limp, eyes rolled into the back of her head, huge tits squished against the golden ground, hips and legs twitching with aftershocks of pleasure, her big bouncy ass jiggling enticingly with each movement. Oh, my God, she breathed out, hips undulating and rolling with lewd thrusts against the ground on pure instinct. The stacked redhead weakly pulled her head up to look at the boy who'd just given her the craziest orgasm she'd ever had and found him staring down at her with a smug, shit-eating grin. No wonder the kid was so bold. It looked like he wasn't a stranger to fucking women silly, and she was just the next bitch that was going to get fucked into oblivion by that massive cock of his. As if threatening her, a spark of electricity coursed over his cock and her eyes widened. If that was just from my nipples, if he fucks me like that, he really is going to ruin me, she shuddered. Yet despite that, Kushina couldn't help the moan of anticipation that left her throat. Daiki stared at the spot where the one-tailed Jinchuriki had been standing in before he departed for a few moments. Hopefully that didn't come back to bite him in the ass. Why can't they just be like Fu? He groaned inwardly. Besides himself and Killer Bee, she was the most well-adjusted Jinchuriki by far, having none of the hang-ups and angst Naruto, Gaara and the like had. Actually, considering Killer Bee's obsession with rap and his own, everything, Fu was probably the most well-adjusted Jinchuriki of all now that she had gotten a little bit of freedom from her village with the shadow clone jutsu he taught her. Lucky number 7, indeed. Isobu piped in. How envious, to have a host that isn't a complete basket case. While I get stuck with you. Shut up bitch, you love it, Daiki snorted back. Besides, you can leave at any time, remember? After I've finally managed to bring your pitiful chakra reserves up to a level where I can comfortably submerge in them and got my pond built the way I like it, Isobu snorted right back at him in return. Fat chance. This is my house now, kid. Ride or die. I go down with my ships like a true captain, you get me? Daiki's gaze turned dry and he said nothing in response. In his mind's eye, he saw Isobu shrug unashamedly. Biju get bored too, you know. And I can see your memories better even than you can. He defended himself. Fair enough. Rolling his eyes, Daiki turned around and paused. Speaking of basket cases that need to become well-adjusted people. He mused to himself and looked directly at Rock Lee, still training himself. With his eyesight he could see the way his body shook, how sweat formed in his pores and dripped out from his face onto the tiled floor of the hospital, and how his arm and leg, both in a thick casting while they healed from being crushed by Gaara's sand, trembled with pain. He should leave. He should walk away and leave the idiot that couldn't take a moment to rub two brain cells together even after being given advice to save his life and spare himself a useless, fruitless fight. But you won't? Isobu mused. Fucking Rock Lee. Daiki ground his teeth together and moved, disappearing in a blur of speed. He touched down a blink later, atop the ledge of the open window, not a sound being made from his feet as he landed. Rock Lee, face angled towards the ground, did not react and continued his way through a struggling one-handed vertical push-up, 1837. He really needed to work on his sensory abilities. And that was coming from him, the laughing stock of the Chameleon clan for his atrocious sensory abilities in comparison to them. You really can't help yourself, huh? Daiki commented after he finished the push-up. Lee flinched and gave a cry of surprise, tipping forward in his surprise and would have smashed his back into the wall if not for Daiki putting his hand out and stopping him, holding him in place. Daiki-kun. Lee, exhaustion evident on his face and slick with sweat, tilted his head back to look up at him from below. That's the name, don't wear it out B. He stopped himself before he called the older bud. He was mad at him after all. So what's this then? Shouldn't you be resting? I cannot. Lee shook his head. The longer I lay around, the further behind I fall. Daiki shook his head. This would just make things worse. You can't train your other side after all. You'll be lopsided, he pointed out. Not that it matters. Your career as a shinobi is over. Lee's eyes widened and his whole body stilled, his face scrunching up with something close to despair, and only barely stopping from reaching that tipping point by sheer will. The boy did not want to show such a thing to him after all. Daiki didn't blame him for that. He would be the same, his pride could never allow it. You found out? Lee asked, a tremble shaking his body that was not at all related to the training he had been forcing himself through. I knew before anybody, Daiki told, leveling him with a serious gaze. With these eyes, I could literally see your bones breaking down the second things went serious. Ah, yes. Lee trailed off and ducked his head down to avoid his scarlet gaze. Gaara-san, truly, was not merciful at all. You did this to yourself. Daiki replied bluntly and without any mercy. He wasn't going to let him evade. You were stupid, ignorant, arrogant, and did I mention stupid? Because you were stupid. Just thinking about it again was riling him up, the point where his vocabulary was failing him. He saw Lee's hand below clench into a fist atop the tile, but Daiki wasn't about to stop right now. Otherwise he'd just repeat the same mistake in the future without learning anything. Sure, Gaara crushed your arm and leg into paste, but given enough time, with help from medic ninja, they'd heal, he continued. The real problem is what you did to yourself. You weren't ready for the gates, your body wasn't strong enough. And the strain of the gates cracked your entirely skeletal structure, including your spine. You have fragments of bone across your entire body, and most importantly, a bunch of it lodged in your spine. We don't have a single medical ninja capable of fixing you. Even Tsunade herself, the greatest medical jutsu user in the world, couldn't fix you without you dying on the operating table. He heard a bare whisper come from Lee below him. Stop, please Daiki-kun. The older boy looked back up at him, his resolve and brave face having faded away, and in its place were tears. The words he wanted to say were lodged in his throat, In response to the boy's tears, he couldn't bring himself to continue lambasting him. I know, it's all my fault. I know I was stupid, Daiki-kun. The boy cried out in despair, but if I gave up, if I retreated, I would have lost something important. How could I continue to believe I could be a splendid shinobi using only taijutsu if I bowed then? Daiki sighed, you were already a splendid shinobi. What? Lee's crying sob stopped abruptly, but the tears didn't stop flowing as he stared at the younger boy, gobsmacked. You were, Daiki shrugged and admitted, despite your lack of talent, you kept on going, you worked hard. You put yourself and your body through hell and dedicated everything to the grind and getting strong enough to become a splendid shinobi. And you became one. Being a splendid shinobi doesn't mean you have to be the strongest. The fact you're only 16 and could beat tons of jonin in a straight-up taijutsu battle shows how hard you worked. But you threw that away, Lee. I threw it away, he whispered, struck. The strength in his arm gave out and he almost fell directly down. Daiki caught him by the back of his shirt and threw him up, spinning the boy through the air, orienting him around and catching him by the collar a second later, holding him aloft in the air so he could stare directly into his eyes. You were a shinobi of Konoha. Promoting the interests of the village and protecting the village, you were already on that path, and you were already on the path to becoming a powerhouse like Guy, he told him, but you threw that away for a pissing contest. You turned your back on your dream of being a splendid shinobi, to feel strong and impress everyone watching, nothing more, nothing less. I just wanted to show that I could do it, that I deserved to be there, that I was strong too. Lee bit his lip, and did not resist, just hung there in his grasp. The defeat radiating from his form was palpable. To who? Guy. He already knows how strong you are, Sakura, because you took a liking to her. She already knows how strong you are as well, you showed her after all. Me? The Hokage? No, we both know you deserved to be there, Daiki replied, eyes narrowing. No, it was about none us. Well, maybe a bit of you wanting to show off to Sakura, I mean, who doesn't like to show off for the girls? No, in the end, you did it all to show off to Neji, your big-time rival. You wanted validation from him. He got right to the true meat of the issue. Lee said nothing, but the way his face scrunched up and he looked away, told him all he needed to hear. You wanted to prove that hard work can surpass a genius' innate talent. The problem being, you seem to be under the impression that these genius don't work hard too. He told him straight up, I respect your dedication to the grind, Lee. Nobody in this village gets it like you and Guy do. But do you think you're the only ones that work hard? Do you think you're the only ones that suffer with not being talented at everything? Here's a newsflash for you, Lee, you're not. But you overcame that, at least physically. Suffering and disappointment aren't enough, Lee. You can't just be strong, you have to be smart, you can't just hope others will think you deserve it, you have to make yourself worthy and full-heartedly believe in it. But all you could think about in that moment, even though your future was as vast and as wide as the planet itself, was proving a point to a jackass that believes in nothing but an arbitrary predestined fate and put everything, your life, your effort, your dreams, the bitter tears you cried and used as motivation, on the line. He got so worked up that by the end, Daiki actually found himself panting as if he'd sprinted through the night and traversed hundreds of miles. For a few moments, there was silence in the hospital room, only interrupted at all by Daiki's panting. It didn't take long for him to get himself back under control, a sigh leaving him as he did. Sorry, he apologized with a grimace, realizing he'd let his emotions get the better of him again. I'm just angry at you for doing this to yourself. No, it's okay, Lee sniffed, shaking his head as he turned back around to look Daiki in the face, giving him a watery smile. You are right after all, Daiki-kun. I was stupid, I did not think things through. Harsh as you were, I am happy to have heard them. It means a lot to me that you thought I was a splendid shinobi in the end. Even if I can no long. Yeah, I'm gonna cut you off there, bud, Daiki sighed. This isn't the end for your dreams yet. Rock Lee gave him a confused look. Daiki said nothing in response and instead, drew upon some of the stored chakra within his heavenly star seal and made a single hand seal. The hand holding Lee lit up with a soft green aura that turned into a shimmering white as he directed the stored chakra into it with his eyes and amplified it. Lee's eyes widened as the white aura spread from Daiki's hand until it covered his whole body. The bowl-cut-haired boy looking to his arm in the cast in something akin to awe, the pain, it's fading away. Within moments, it was done and Daiki lowered the boy he was holding up to the ground. His feet, One in a massive cast just like his arm touched the ground, and beyond hunching over slightly because of the bone fragments lodged in his spine, he stayed on his feet. My leg and arm, you healed them? Lee stared at him, mouth agape. I healed everything I could, Daiki nodded. It had taken a not so small chunk of the stored chakra to do so, but it was not all that much in the grand scheme of things. Conversion-wise, about a year or so of life force. I can't do anything about the fragments of bone in you. If I could, I would have already. Yes, I suppose you would. You are kind after all, Daiki-kun, Lee replied, hiding the disappointment. Even if I cannot continue the path of being a shinobi, this act and your words mean a lot to me. Look, I know this will sound weird after everything I just said, but you'll be a shinobi again, I promise, Daiki declared. I don't have the skill to heal you fully, and Tsunade doesn't have the ability to keep you alive without a doubt during a surgery, not to mention she isn't even in the village anymore. But I'll get her back here to fix you up, and I'll use my jutsu to keep you alive and make sure you don't die in the process, he promised. Daiki-kun, Rock Lee's eyes filled with tears, and the boy spread his arms wide, cast and all and absolutely bawled as he hugged Daiki. Daiki grimaced at the contact, but did let him cry it out. There, he awkwardly pat him on the back. In the end, Lee outright ended up crying himself to sleep in Daiki's arms. Despite the brave face he'd put on and how he tried to shoulder on regardless, it really, truly had been weighing on the older boy's mind heavily. And Daiki would not hold it against him. Despite his unfortunate position being all his own fault and the height of stupidity, the dam had simply broken when Daiki made his promise to heal the older boy, and the emotions he'd been holding back had surged out all at once and overwhelmed him. Once he'd conked out, Daiki had simply put him back into his bed and left via the window he'd entered. Which led him to now, walking through the streets of Konoha, back towards his home. The question is, how the hell do I deliver on that promise now? He mused. He really did have a bad habit of talking big without being 100% capable of backing it up. Sure, he could deliver on his half of things and keep Lee alive during the operation to remove the bone shards from his spine, and even fix it up good and proper afterwards so he didn't even need to go through a long recovery time like he did in the other timeline. The problem was, how the fuck am I going to convince Tsunade to come back here? He wondered. He highly doubted she'd return over a threat of being branded a nuke nin. Nor would he go that far anyway. Tsunade was the greatest medical ninja in the entire world. The strongest woman in the world barring Kaguya, who didn't really count, and a high-tier S-class combatant. Turning her against the village was stupidity, and he needed all the help he could get in the future. Maybe Naruto, he wondered, cupping his chin. It had worked in the other timeline, but there was extenuating circumstances that allowed him to bring her back in that world. He couldn't be sure at all that would work here, especially since, if he had his way, Orochimaru wasn't going to be walking away after the invasion with something as little as 2 soul-munched arms. For one, he wasn't going to let the old man get to the point where he'd have to use the Reaper Death Seal. Even if he had to trap Orochimaru in the 4 Red Yang formation and spam Bijudama after Bijudama until he was sure he erased the Snake Man from existence. Old man Sarutobi might not have wanted to get his youth back, but Daiki for sure wasn't going to let him croak that easily. Oh, also, note to self. Check out the Uzumaki Mask Temple and release Minato's soul from the Shinigami's stomach. He paused as he remembered. Though that of course would have to wait until after the invasion, so he didn't need to worry about Mr. Flash by grinding his innards to pulp with a Rasengan. Daiki. A familiar voice calling his name broke him from his thoughts, and the muscular looked over his shoulder to find a familiar pink-haired, green-eyed girl jogging up to him. Yo, he greeted Sakura as she reached him. What's up, green-eyed lady? Is that a jealousy quip? Was the first thing she asked, giving him a frown and searching look. No, Daiki tilted his head to the side, confused him. Why, are you jealous of something I should know about? You just have green eyes, don't tell me you forgot about that? Oh, Sakura blinked, and then laughed. It's just you have this habit of making stupid quips and little digs like that. Especially when you're around Kakashi-sensei, so I thought you were being you. I am so not that bad. He denied. You kinda are. You kinda are. Both Sakura and Isobu replied at the same time. Damn, was he? He coughed. Fine, whatever. I wasn't doing it now though. He waved it off. So, what's up? I should be asking you that. Sakura rolled those emerald greens of hers. I've not seen you since the end of the preliminaries. Honestly, I've not seen Naruto or Sasuke-kun or Kakashi-sensei either. I mean, I know they're training, but I kinda expected to see them around, you know. I was on my way to visit Lee when I saw you jumping out of his window, so I decided to catch you." "Seriously, Kakashi?" Daiki deadpanned inwardly. Did that idiot seriously disappear on the girl and leave her with nothing to do? Sure, she wasn't in the final rounds, but come on. It was literally a full month where she was left with nothing to do. Not even missions, since she was allowed to take any herself, yet being a kunoichi under Kakashi's command. What if she was an orphan like him? How was she supposed to make ends meet to get by? That dude needed a kick up the ass. "Sasuke and Kakashi are up in the mountains behind the training grounds," he replied out loud with. At least that was where he remembered they were training. He then turned, eyes searching, and pointed in the direction of where he left a certain busty blonde. "Naruto is somewhere around there." Sakura blinked. "How'd you know that?" she wondered. Daiki grinned, pointing at his eyes. "These eyes, baby. Amongst other things like seeing chakra and through solid objects and such, I can also see up to 10 miles away." "Oh," she made a small O shape with her mouth, before stepping forward to look deeper into their eyes. "They're pretty. Kinda like Sasuke-kun's Sharingan, but a gentler color and doesn't have the little comma things. And actually, I was meaning to ask about them. How did you get them? Are you from a clan or something I don't know about? Do you have a bloodline?" "No, actually, you kind of do." Isobu interrupted him before he could get to replying. "Putting aside this status screen of yours, which I can't confirm is one or not, you do have abilities that will pass on through your blood. For one, your chakra is naturally much more potent, not just from my influence, but because of multiple different chakras in your heavenly star seal. Not to mention, my choral style, are full on a part of you now. Even if I was taken out of you, you'd still have it. I'm fairly certain that will pass on to your children as well." "Huh. Cool," Daiki grinned, filing that tidbit away for later. "Well, I'm not part of a clan, but I do have a bloodline. These eyes aren't part of it though. I killed a guy with these out on a mission and took them for myself." "You mean those aren't your own eyes?" Sakura gave him an odd look. "Yup," Daiki confirmed with a nod, shamelessly, plucked them right out of his skull and then used the mystical palm jutsu to implant them in my own after plucking my own out." "Ew," Sakura wrinkled her nose in disgust. "You seriously plucked out your own eyes to implant the eyes of someone you killed?" "I mean, when you say it like that, you make it sound like a bad thing," Daiki pointed out, before adding, "Besides, I don't see you saying anything about Kakashi running around with another dude's Sharingan in one of his eye sockets." "Kakashi-sensei doesn't brag about murdering someone and stealing their eyes," Sakura deadpanned back. "What can I say, I'm just built different from that scrub." Daiki gave her a shit-eating grin. "Besides, it was hardly murder. He was part of a duo that was enslaving and murdering civilians for kicks." Saying it like that and telling himself that helped him sleep better at night. Not that he actually needed all that much sleep now. But still. It's still gross though. Sakura shook her head. "Anyway, now that you've brought it up again, I was wondering if you could maybe give me some pointers on learning the mystical palm jutsu?" Right, she had shown an interest in it, hadn't she? "Sure," Daiki shrugged. The quicker he got her started on things, the stronger she'd become in the future. It'll have to be now though. I'm heading out for a mission first thing tomorrow morning." "Okay, that should be." Sakura began replying only to pause. "A mission? Now? With the third round coming up? Where to?" "Yup, and the Mist Village." Daiki nodded, confirming. "The Mist Village? Now? Why are they sending a genin there? And will you even be back in time?" Sakura gaped at him. He noticed quite a few people stopping to stare because of how loud her voice got there, so he put his hand on her shoulder. "Let's take this somewhere a bit more private." "All right." Sakura agreed and he made a single hand sign, before disappearing in a blur with a body flicker, taking the girl along with him. They appeared not long later, at his home away from home. The origin and birthplace of the one true grind. Training Ground 69. "The body flicker sure is handy," Sakura mused. "Do you think you could teach me it as well?" "Shouldn't be too hard," Daiki shrugged, "though it won't be much help in a fight for you. Without the Sharingan or reflexes the Yondaime Hokage, the tunnel vision will be killer. Still, it's pretty good for getting around." Sakura hummed and followed him into the training ground. She paused though at the sign designating the training ground number. "You know, now that I know what you're like, I'm not at all surprised you chose this training ground." She looked over her shoulder at him to give him a deadpan look. He smirked and looked down, staring blatantly at her ass stretching out those skin-tight spats of hers. Sakura snorted and gave him a dry look. "Yeah, that's about right. She nodded and continued on, making her way into the actual training ground. This time though, there was a definite wiggle in her walk. So, what's the deal with your mission? Why do you have to bring me here to talk about it? Peeling his eyes off of her ass, Daiki shrugged. Well, we needed to come to a training ground anyway for me to teach you, he replied. That is unless you want to use the training spot I have at my place. Sakura snorted. No, I know better than to go home with you. She turned to him. I get a feeling there would be a whole lot less training going on there. Not really, he shrugged. I might push things a bit, but you already know I'm not gonna force anything. Sakura grinned at him. Who said anything about you forcing it? She teased, making him blink at the implications. So, mission? I'll be gone for at least a week, maybe 2, Daiki shrugged. I'm heading there to open up talks about the Hidden Mist Village aligning with us. You what? Sakura goggled. Why are they sending you? You're just a genin. Sure, in a completely different league from the rest of us genin. But shouldn't a higher-up be doing this kind of thing? I am a higher-up, Daiki shrugged, feeling no need to hide it. I mean, it was already pretty blatant. I'm just in the Chunin exams for us to show off, right? You did mention something like that. Sakura's brows furrowed. So does that mean, you've already been picked to be promoted to Chunin after the exams? Jonin actually. He corrected her. Her eyes widened. A Jonin? Like Kakashi-sensei? She gasped. Something like that. Daiki confirmed with a nod, not to mention, I'm next in line to be Hokage. Sakura blinked, before bursting out laughing. Ha 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 ha. Great peals of amusement erupted from her lips, and lasted a good 20 or so seconds, before she managed to manage it down to just some small chuckles, wiping a tear of amusement from eye. Oh, that was a good one. You as Hokage. In response, Daiki said nothing, merely smiling at her, not at all bothered. Slowly, the grin on her lips dropped and her eyes widened as realization set in. As always, she was quick on the uptake and his lack of reply said more than enough to her. Oh god, you weren't kidding, she gaped, staring at him in almost horror. You, as the Hokage. How? Should I be insulted that nobody believes me at first when I tell them this? Daiki wondered. Tenten, Naruto and now Sakura. Sure, they were all of his generation and were pretty ignorant of how things actually worked unlike him, but still. Well, Sakura caught on quickly to it not being a lie at least. Because I'm strong, and that's the main requirement of being Hokage, Daiki shrugged. While not as strong as Kakashi even when using the seal I got from Orochimaru and improved upon to make it better. I've got another power, that makes me the strongest guy in this village besides the Hokage himself. Another power? Sakura trailed off, before her eyes lit up suddenly. Is it something to do with the hero water? You drank that before when we went to the waterfall village and you powered up massively from it for a bit and absolutely crushed that guy that took me hostage. Can you use that on the fly or something now? No, good try though, Daiki laughed. It's something that needs to be kept secret for now. Hokage's law and all, and it's not really my power so much as a power I can borrow. And that's who I've been with for the last while actually. I was getting personal training from the old man. Training with the Hokage himself, huh? That must have been amazing. Sakura gasped in awe, before swallowing and shaking her head. But you as the Hokage, huh? I can only imagine the kind of stupid laws you would pass. Hee, Daiki thumbed his nose. The first one I'm passing is that all Haku no Ichi, like you for instance, are required to wear tiny mini-skirts. He proclaimed proudly, punching his fist into the air grandly. Of course it is. Sakura gave him a dry look. Better get shopping for some nice mini-skirts for the future. He taunted her with a laugh. Sakura in return merely shrugged. I'm good, I already own plenty. Daiki crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow at her challengingly. But are they pleated? More than half of them, Sakura shrugged, and then laughed lightly, really not hiding your tastes at all here. Good girl, being prepared and ahead of the game. That's a true kunoichi right there. Daiki praised her. You know that's the first time since I graduated the academy somebody has called me a good kunoichi? Well, beyond Lee and Naruto. Sakura cocked her head thoughtfully. And it's because I own some small skirts? And it came from the future Hokage himself. Aren't you special? Daiki grinned at her. Yay, she replied dully. This is truly going to be the highlight of my career as a kunoichi. He laughed. Good to see how much my opinion means to you, he shot back. But, while we're on the topic and getting around to training, what actually is your plan with your career? What are you aiming for here? Well, besides wanting to ride Sasuke until his bed breaks. Sakura bit her lip. To be honest, I don't know anymore. The Forest of Death was a real wake-up call for me, she replied, and then raised both eyebrows at him. And should the future Hokage really talk like that? Besides, you already know, I decided to let that go. I've already learned how shallow my feelings were. Fair enough, there's plenty of time to think of what you want to aim for, to be honest. It doesn't even have to be anything grand. You can just want to be a strong, well-earning kunoichi and live a good life, Daiki replied, nodding his head, and I can stop if you want. I'm just having a laugh, he offered. No, it's alright, she huffed a bit through her nose, a small half-smile splaying across her face. I've gotten used to it now, and I kind of like how upfront and honest you are about everything. It's a far cry from Naruto just telling me what I want to hear and Sasuke barely ever opening his mouth when I talk to him. Well, fair enough. He could see how that would be a refreshing change of pace, and it was always nice to see where you stood with people. And you like me complimenting you, he pointed and added. Maybe a bit. Sakura shrugged, unforthcomingly, but her pretty green eyes glittered with happiness and gave her away regardless. Alright then, fat ass, and that's with a PH and not an F. Daiki clapped his hands together. Let's get down to training, shall we? Still not charming to say that, by the way, even if you change the spelling, Sakura told him, but nodded in agreement nonetheless. Perhaps, unsurprisingly, it didn't take Sakura very long at all to understand and get the basics down of the mystical palm jutsu. She easily understood the concept behind it. It only had one hand sealed to remember, and the chakra drain on it wasn't too bad to deal with for short bursts. Within just 2 hours of training with the jutsu, with him giving pointers to her to help her here and there, Sakura got the jutsu down, for the most part. She had trouble keeping the chakra transformation consistent, but was able to do it properly, the exact opposite of the problem Tenten had. Then again, Tenten hadn't been told about how the image of the jutsu in her mind and shaping it was important, and Sakura had him to tell her it straight up instead of just having to piece things together from a scroll. But it was still quite impressive to get it mostly down after 2 hours. Her chakra control really was something impressive indeed. I'm exhausted. Sakura wiped sweat from her brow, bent over in front of him, sweat soaking her top. I feel like I could keel over any second. It was just too bad he was sitting in front of her and not behind, or he was sure to have been getting a real good view. As it was, he was sitting cross-legged on the ground with a scroll open and an ink brush in hand. He was in the process of writing down the instructions for the body flicker jutsu, since he had long since realized she wouldn't have enough chakra to continue training to get it down as well. The Shinkugen was handy like that. You gotta work on that stamina, you've only been going a couple hours. Daiki rolled his eyes, finishing up what he was writing with a little flourish and sealing the ink brush away. Tut tut, what would your dear Sasuke-kun think about that? The pink-haired girl huffed deeply and rolled her eyes. I don't think he's ever considered how my stamina would apply in the bedroom, she retorted. I think you're just projecting. She added, and with a deep breath, stood up fully and tugged on the collar of her dress to air it out a bit. Oh, I guess so, fair enough, Daiki nodded, rolling up the scroll and standing up, grinning at her. In that case, you should really work on that stamina. This is for the good of your future Hokage after all. Sorry Hokage-sama, sir, I'll be sure to work on my lacking stamina, sir. Sakura snorted, giving him a mock salute. Good soldier, Daiki nodded, pleased. It'd be a shame if a lady with an ass like yours didn't have the stamina to use it properly after all. He added, holding the scroll out to her. She blinked, taking it. What's this? She asked, easily ignoring his comment about her ass. Since you're too drained of chakra to continue and I'll be out of the village come tomorrow, I wrote the instructions down for the body flicker. Daiki replied as she took it. It's pretty simply, you should be able to get it down even without me coaching you with this. You're pretty talented after all and smart enough to understand it easily. Oh thanks, the pink-haired girl smiled at his compliment, before her green eyes gleamed with mischief. And, about my stamina? You're the one always going on about how big and fat my ass is. Have you considered that it's making me waste stamina quicker cause it weighs me down? He blinked before laughing at her reply. I didn't actually. Good point. He agreed with her. That's a whole lot of ass. Still doesn't mean you can be content with pitiful stamina though. If you want though, I know a good training method for increasing the stamina of girls with asses like yours. Uh-huh. Sakura nodded. And let me guess, it involves a whole lot of me bouncing and probably moaning. Squealing actually. He corrected her, and your ass cheeks clapping. Sounds about right with you. She shook her head, before blinking. Wait, how do ass cheeks clap? She asked, looking confused. Poor Sakura, for all your intelligence and knowledge, you clearly don't know about the true important things in life. Daiki clicked his tongue and shook his head. I suppose. I can take more time out of my busy schedule to teach you though. Sakura nodded. I'll ask Ino. Wait, what? You're talking to her again? Did you make up? Daiki wondered. In the other timeline, they only really made up after fighting in the prelims. That didn't happen here. A bit after the forest, Sakura shrugged, but since I'm not going after Sasuke-kun anymore, there's really no point to continuing the rivalry over him with her anymore. Fair enough, Daiki nodded, though, just because you're not doing it anymore doesn't mean her chances are going to improve. Sucks to be her. Sakura shrugged with a smirk. She glanced at the scroll in her hands, before the smirk left suddenly and was replaced by a frown. Which reminds me, she said, and looked him in the eye, if you want, you can get rid of the forced palm seal you let me use. It meant a lot you let me use it, and it really helped me a ton, but I know it isn't mine or anything like that. Oh right, he'd forgotten that he had given her that, hadn't he? Keep it, he waved her off, just remember to work on toughening up your arms so you can endure it more. A pretty smile replaced the frown just as quickly as it had appeared. What do you think I've been doing all this month in the first place? It wasn't like Kakashi-sensei left me with anything else to do, Sakura replied, before surprising him by stepping forward and pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. Still, thank you, I mean, this seal actually kind of means a lot to me. It was kind of the origin point for me, you know, of me getting my head screwed on straight about what being a kunoichi really means, she said as she pulled back, cheeks flushing a light pink. Don't mention it, Daiki just smiled back at her, I'm glad it helped you out. And he was. He was pretty proud of his first seal and its applications in combat and still used it even now quite often. But he wasn't sure if he'd fucked some things up that were important, especially intervening as he had in the Forest of Death. The fact his seal that he gave to Sakura had smoothed it over and even gave better results, was totally worth giving her it. They stayed there like that, staring into each other's eyes. 10 seconds passed, then 30. Before long a minute had passed and Sakura's eye twitched. Oh come on, what are you waiting for? She growled at him. What? Daiki blinked, confused. Seriously, aren't you gonna squeeze my ass or spank me like you always do when we're heading different ways? Sakura gave him a dry look. I thought it was pretty obvious we were more or less done and splitting off here for tonight. What with your mission tomorrow and all? I mean, I didn't want to ruin the moment. He offered. Hey, you're also the one who gave me into trouble for it before when I was healing, you remember? And told me you weren't really interested in me if I wasn't being serious. So I backed off beyond the flirting. That was a good talk even. Helped him sort his head out a bit. And now he was just waiting for Tenten sort her own self out before they started things off and tried out dating properly. Sure, he believed he was a free lad to sow his wild oats until then, but Sakura explicitly wasn't interested in just a casual fuck like Anko had been, and that wasn't so much as a casual fuck as a transaction? It had been fun either way. Well, it's not about dating right now, is it? I'm just willing to let you have a feel, it's a gratitude thing. Sakura coughed and explained and pivoted gracefully, bending forward to reveal her ample, curvaceous ass and enticingly wiggled it at him invitingly. Come on, you know you want to, Daiki. You've been making quips about this fat ass of mine for the last 2 hours. Once every while, and you instigated a lot of it, Daiki sighed, but his eyes were locked on the view she was giving him and then mentally smacked himself for looking a gift horse in mouth. Not that I'm gonna say no to this. Reaching forward, he took a nice big handful of her ass and squeezed and was honestly surprised when she looked over her shoulder at him with a pleased look. What was even going on here? Is that all you want? She smirked at him. There was a bit of a spring in Sakura's step as she made her way home after parting ways with Daiki. And a sting across her ass from where he'd spanked her. She was in a good mood. She'd learned a lot over the last hours. Some useful, some kind of crazy, but all in all, she was quite happy with how things had went. She had no idea why she had been so forward with Daiki. She hadn't changed her opinion, she didn't have any interest in just sleeping around even if she was really grateful to him. And he was really hot. And those muscles were drool-worthy. But she couldn't deny she enjoyed his attention, and his compliments made her puff her meager chest out with pride. Her fat ass had always been one of the things she'd been most self-conscious about, especially because Ino always used it against her when they insulted each other. Nowadays, she was quite pleased with it, all thanks to Daiki. I have no idea what I'm doing here, Sakura realized, but it was fun at least. Honestly, after Sakura left to head home, Daiki was just pure on bemused. Her attitude right then was a far cry what she was like in the other timeline when it came to perverted actions. Any perverted action around her there ended up with her fist turning concrete to powder her bones. Poor Naruto. He'd lost count of how many times her fist had smashed his head into the ground with bone-breaking force. Then again, she had tried that with him initially, he just wasn't kind enough to let her do it. He wasn't really going to complain, but it was still a massive turnaround from what her other self was like. Had their talk during the second route really impacted her that much? He stared after the older pink-haired girl's form until she disappeared from good old trusty training ground 69, before deciding to put it in her out of mind for the moment and disappearing with a blur of motion using the body flicker. He headed straight home to his house, reaching his destination in less than a minute. He was half expecting Enko to still be around given his offer to let her chill at his place while he was training with the old man Hokage. Daiki was somewhat relieved she wasn't there, though he found with a quick sweep of his eyes, his all-seeing scarlet eye allowing him to easily see through every wall in the building. Fun and sexy as Enko was, Daiki had been keeping it suppressed all day, ever since he met with Naruto and helped him get a basic understanding of his abilities as a Jinchuriki, but inspiration had struck him. A new possible way to augment his grind had appeared before him, and now that he was home, he could truly ponder on it. He made his way to his living room and collapsed on his sofa, staring right up at the ceiling, before speaking aloud. "What do you think?" he asked aloud. "It has merit, I won't lie," Isobu replied. "The problem is you'll need to design an all-new seal to do it. Though admittedly with your other seals you've already laid out the groundwork. And you need to be careful not to overdo it. If you do, it will make your chakra fluctuate a lot like his, though not to the same extent, and make your chakra harder to control." His idea was simple. Copy Naruto. Not specifically anything he was actually doing himself, but rather what they discovered earlier today while inside his seal. The pure yang chakra that made up the half of Kurama inside Naruto, making it so the abundance of chakra seeping into him was pure yang, and to his understanding, was obviously not only enhancing the quality of his physical growth, but to an extent, allowing his physical capabilities to grow passively. It was not some truly massive amount. But say for example, that passive growth added a single pound of lifting strength per day. It was a tiny minuscule amount per day, but over time added up massively. Using that 1 pound example, Naruto as he was now, at almost 14 years old, would have been capable of lifting over 2 tons without ever having to have trained a day in his life. It wasn't like Daiki was all that specifically unhappy with his physical growth at all right now. In fact, he was over the moon about it. The rate he was progressing was utterly absurd compared to the average shinobi or kunoichi. But that simply wasn't good enough when he knew of the kind of monsters that were lurking out there, the kind of monsters that had high chances of making a move not only upon him in the future, but the Leaf Village and he supposed the world as well. Utterly absurd compared to the average, still wasn't enough. People joked all the time on versus threads and shit back home. People pulling out their ass how Naruto characters were super weak and couldn't do anything to the likes of Dragon Ball Z characters, and people going on and on about how Kishimoto claimed Madara was only as strong as Nappa. Putting all that bullshit aside, it was easy to say stuff like that when it wasn't real, when it was just some losers behind a computer screen fanboying over their favorite anime. But when that reality became real, Daiki wondered what they'd have to say to the fact that Madara could literally create massive meteors, where if a single one came down and hit the planet of his old world, the planet would have become inhabitable and all of humanity would most likely have been wiped out. Or the fact the man could literally pause time with his eyes, or rewind time with his eyes. And that was only his base Mangekyo Sharingan abilities. Daiki wasn't even sure how he was going to counter that in the future. How did one counter the ability to freeze or rewind time? But that was a problem for future Daiki to solve. He, the Daiki of the present, could only do everything he could upon the path of the grind and squeeze every last drop of grind-enhanced strength out where he could. Putting that horrible thought aside for the moment, Isobu coughed. As far as Naruto's growth goes, you're mostly correct. Though given his strength right now and the subpar training he has gone through, even if not his own fault, I'd wager your analogy is a bit off. Strength-wise alone, I'd say if using you as a basis, I'd say roughly 3 to 5 times your estimate. Well, it was just an example. Daiki shrugged, banishing the thoughts of Madara once more to the deepest parts of his psyche where he would do his best not to think on the man again for quite a while. He had to let loose a whistle despite himself. So with no training at all, Naruto would have been capable of lifting between 6 and 10 tons, huh? That wasn't too shabby at all. It didn't compare of course to him right now, since he was literally wearing 30 tons per limb right now and was actually having an easy time moving around with them and would need to upgrade them soon, but still, A passive growth like that would be lovely. But the true kicker was the enhanced physical growth from the overabundance of yang chakra. It would increase the rate of his growth by a decent margin, which would be amazing. It would speed up your timetable a little bit for sure, and would offset the fact that you're going to end up Hokage at the rate you're going and be doing paperwork a lot, Isobu teased. Admittedly, the stronger you become physically and the more potent your chakra, the greater our Biju mode will be. Well yeah, obviously, since their physical abilities would be combined at that point more or less. Not just physical abilities, our chakra as well, Isobu replied. Remember we Biju are masses of sentient chakra given form. Our physical abilities come from our chakra, not muscles like you humans. It is why I said before that technically yes, in pure power and physical ability, Kurama is the strongest of we Biju by far, because his amount of chakra even in his current state dwarfs the rest of us. Huh. That was actually a little different than he thought about it. He thought it would basically just be his physical abilities and Isobu's own combined, because he was thinking of it like how his strength worked and assumed the Biju's massive strength and other physical abilities came from their absurd size. But if it was merely because of their chakra then, yes, no matter what size we are, as long as we have full access to our chakra, our strength, speed and such will remain the same. The only thing our size adds in that sense is the sheer scale and weight behind our physical abilities, Isobu explained. This also means that even should the day come where you vastly surpass my abilities as Hashirama and Madara did to even Kurama, the Biju mode you will have access to with me will forever increase in power with each little bit of physical strength and chakra you gain. Huh. That was amazing. And it explained a lot. For instance, Kurama was monstrously strong, no doubt. But the speed he and Naruto moved at during the Fourth War in the other timeline, at first he hadn't thought Kurama capable of such a thing, especially in a half-state. But Naruto, who had more chakra than the likes of Kisame at that point by far, adding his chakra to the Biju mode and their combined might looking more like Kurama's chakra plus Naruto's physical abilities equals Biju mode output. It made a lot more sense. That first Biju mode was probably a decent bit stronger than Kurama's own natural full strength before he was halved. The same as my estimates, yes. Isobu agreed. Whoa, wait a minute. Daiki quickly sat up, eyes widening as something clicked. At the beginning of the Fourth War, Naruto and that half of Kurama together had comparable chakra to Hashirama. But through that war, Naruto's grew massively to the point where he was nearly comparable with Hashirama chakra-wise on his own. It was absurd to think about, but true and made some sense. Kurama was constantly regenerating Naruto's own chakra and supplanting it with his own at a constant pace. While Naruto himself had thousands of shadow clones spread across multiple battlefields, and was transferring his and Kurama's chakra in the form of Biju cloaks to tens of thousands of people, handling not only his own capacity, but Kurama's at the same time and constantly using it up over and over and over. It was no wonder his chakra capacity grew so massively. But beyond that, it meant that Naruto and Kurama's Biju mode was continuously evolving and growing stronger through the course of the Fourth War at a rapid rate, and then they added Sage mode on top of that. And yet Madara beat them with ease, without his eyes, alongside the other 8 of you in Gaara. Daiki said aloud. Once more that monstrous beast of a shinobi rising to the forefront of the topic. What an absolute monster of a unit that fucker was. Every time he thought there was nothing more mind-blowing he could think about when it came to that guy, there was always more. Fuck that guy, man. Gritting his teeth, Daiki shook his head and banished Madara from his mind and moved on. Assuming we win in the end, doesn't that mean that with the passive growth of the yang chakra and the constant chakra growth I go through thanks to you and my heavenly star seal, he began, that since my life force is ever increasing, that we'll just continue to passively get stronger for all eternity? More or less, yes. Isobu nodded. With that, he would become so in tune with the grind, that the grind would passively enhance him for all time. It always comes back to the grind with you, huh? Isobu snorted. Yes. But among those thoughts, then the greater Isobu's own chakra was, the greater the increase he would passively attain as well. Which meant that, soon he would have to pay a visit not only to the dragon vein, but the mine containing the source for the stone of Gelel. With that, their combined Biju mode would jump massively in power and then increase the rate at which his own chakra grew as well, increasing the rate once more at which their Biju mode's power passively grew. If only there was a way though beyond that to increase Isobu's chakra even more. Well, There was that dumb demon in the land of swamps he had to go beat the shit out of and steal the army of. But that would be minor compared to the dragon vein and mine of Gelel. Speaking of chakra, I think you've reached the point now where you can safely increase the amount of shadow clones you use during training. Isobu piped up, breaking his thought process. He grinned, so jump from 200 to 300 now? That's not a jump, it's a leap, Isobu snorted, but I suppose it should be fine. Perfect, then while I do that, I'll get working on making a seal to convert chakra into pure yang chakra. He bounced up off the couch and clapped his hands excitedly. I'll add it to the heavenly star seal actually, and the pure yang will then be offset by your chakra filtering into my own, and then I won't need to worry about my balance of chakra fluctuating too much. What about sleeping for your mission tomorrow? Isobu huffed in amusement. Sleep is for weaklings that don't believe in the grind, Daiki merely laughed. He didn't really need much sleep anyway and could go entire days without it easily. Admittedly, the mission tomorrow was important though. He paused. I'll get a few hours in later, there's still a good 8 hours before I need to set off for the mission anyway. So much could be done in 8 hours after all. From 200 to 300 shadow clones. 8 hours. With 300 shadow clones training their grind-loving hearts out, those 8 hours actually became more akin to 2400 hours. Which in total equaled roughly 100 days. Nearly a third of a year of training being put into a single night. It was simply absurd how busted the shadow clone technique was in the hands of one like Daiki or Naruto, Jinchurikis with massive amounts of chakra and the healing ability to handle the absurd influx of information one gained from such a training method. The yang conversion seal was a simple matter. He had, after all, created a seal previously to convert the star chakra contained within his heavenly star seal into safe usable chakra to enhance himself with. It was a simple matter of just altering the conversion seal to only convert half of the original makeup and filter it into his own chakra system and body. He didn't even need any of his clones for it, beyond one to apply the seal to himself. That left the newly spawned 300 clones to work all night on what he wanted. And he decided simply on taking care of something he should have done a long time ago. Learning both the Chidori and the Rasengan. As he knew the exact training method and ways to mastery for them, and even a shortcut to skip the initial complexities of the Rasengan. It was merely 2 hours before he had the Chidori down pat, alongside being able to form a Rasengan with a clone. With 300 clones then working on the jutsu after the Chidori was completed, and the shortcut to enhance his training, it was all too easy to pick up the intricacies of the pure, mastered Rasengan. Over the course of another 2 hours, which with his shadow clones was more akin to 600 hours, roughly 25 days. Such was the grandness and sheer complication of a jutsu that was the Rasengan. And it was why as dawn was beginning to approach, Daiki found himself within Isobu's personal dimension, sitting atop a large rocky outcropping he formed himself through an earth jutsu. He held one palm up in front of his face, a blinding bright swirling sphere of destruction rotating above the palm of his hand. Such an amazing jutsu. Daiki mouthed to himself, awe in his gaze. He was loud in the beautiful blue sphere of power. With his eyes, he could track the many, many different rotating threads of chakra that made up the spiraling sphere. Or at least a fraction of them. With the all-seeing scarlet eye, Daiki could make out tens of thousands of different chakra rotations within the sphere before it simply became too much and he completely lost count. But in total, the sheer amount completely dwarfed just a mere tens of thousands. And that was where his awe came from. How did Minato Namikaze create such a jutsu? The only reason Daiki was able to recreate the jutsu himself was because he knew the exact training method from his knowledge of the other timeline. But the idea of starting at the base and coming up with a jutsu like this boggled his mind. Just from learning and watching the ways the chakra rotated within his palm within his eyes, massively deepened his understanding of chakra. The Yondaime Hokage truly was a genius. Which makes me wonder how he never managed to take it to the next step. Daiki thought. At the exact moment a screeching chime-like noise grated upon his ears. He looked up from the Rasengan just in time to watch one of his clones miles off in the distance plunge down towards the ground. Blinding rotating shuriken of wind chakra churning with his palm before he slammed it into the ground. And it erupted into a gargantuan massive dome of grinding chakra and piercing minuscule microscopic wind blades that tore the area asunder, devastating multiples acres of ground within the dimension and leaving a crater a good 50 feet deep within the earth. The wind style. Rasen Shuriken. in contrast to the Rasengan itself. The wind style, Rasengan and the wind style, Rasen Shuriken were wholly easy to get down. Admittedly he needed clones to use them and it was beyond him as he was currently to figure out how to use them with one hand and no clones, beyond perhaps chakra arms like Naruto did in the other timeline. But even then it boggled him that Minato could create a technique such as the Rasengan, but overlook something as simple as using clones to help form the enhanced versions. Was he just the type that was completely galaxy-brained and simple solutions never occurred to him? Daiki wondered idly, staring at the beautiful devastation wrought by the S-class wind ninjutsu. His first S-class jutsu. Technically, the Bijudama was an S-class jutsu for sure. And his combination of the twin black dragon blizzard and lightning style was so destructive it could be classified as an S-class jutsu as well. But that was two jutsu in one and the Bijudama technically didn't count as a ninjutsu. So yes, this was his first S-class ninjutsu. Yet, amazing as it was, and awesome as it would be as a trump card. He was vastly more excited to have the Rasengan itself now that he understood just how absurdly complicated it was. After all, it was the next step for him he decided when it came to enhancing his chakra control grind. The next step of the agenda was making 2 Rasengans. And then it was mini Rasengans atop his fingertips. And he would push that as chakra control training every day until he could create 10 of them on every single fingertip. And then he would do it while using the tree walking exercise. And then water walking. And then walking atop rushing raging waterfalls. He truly had to thank Minato for the Rasengan. His chakra control training had been slowing down massively lately, but with this, he would be able to push the grind even further beyond. Just looking at the gains he'd made from tonight from learning the Rasengan made giddy. He pulled up his status to look it over, a grin on his face as he saw the gains he'd grinded through the night reflected back at him. Name: Daiki Yurei. Age: 13. Chakra capacity: 198,600 198,600s, low tier cage. Strength: 205, endurance: 293, durability: 207. Agility: 205, taijutsu: 262 500s ninjutsu: 400 500s. Genjutsu: 107 500s bukajutsu: 184 500s chakra control: 350 500s. Chakra affinities: lightning, expert, the heaven spark; water, expert, the sea parts before you wind, master, the gale bows; earth, adept, the earth shakes; fire, novice, simmering power; fuinjutsu, advanced, the breath hitches. His chakra control had risen over 20 in the last night thanks to the Rasengan. And through the Chidori, Rasengan, wind style. Rasengan and wind style. Rasen Shuriken, his ninjutsu stat had hit 400. 400, it was his highest skill stat by far now. He wondered, just how high was old man Sarutobi's for him to be able to recreate jutsu like the Rasengan and Chidori from just a glance? He couldn't even imagine that kind of ability right now without the Shinkugen. He had to have been at like 500 or near that, right? Or was he somehow beyond that? It wouldn't surprise him, that old monkey was a monster. And speaking of that old monkey, Daiki sighed, waving away his status screen and dispelling the Rasengan in his hand as he stood up. It's almost time to go meet him and Anko to start the mission, huh? He mused. That was disappointing. He'd hit an all-new milestone in his grind and wanted to pursue even further. Even the fact he'd have a mission all alone with Anko playing honey pot for him to stop any ideas going to his head for wanting to leave for Mist to bed Maid Terumi couldn't change that. Anko was a stacked babe. And Maid Terumi was no doubt going to be sex on legs. But the grind was eternal. And he already so many ideas raging around his head. Like for instance, what would a lightning Rasengan be? Lightning was all about shocking and piercing a target. So, a drill maybe? He had a flash of an imagine in head, of a black and red drill-like blade, a spiraling red hurricane of energy forming around it before being unleashed in a devastating churning beam of destruction that pierced through all and wiped out everything in its path. Aya and Inuma Elish. Could he something like that with a mastered lightning-style Rasengan? If the absurd amount of destruction between Chidori and Rasengan clashing was anything to go by, the absurd destruction wrought by such a thing might be comparable. Or what about that Nega Naruto Menma with his absurd evil version of the Rasen Shuriken, the spiraling fear wheel that could destroy over 70 miles of land in one shot? So many ideas he wanted to experiment with. You'll have time for that later, you have enough on your plate between that seal you're trying to create, isobu input, not to mention, you haven't even mastered your lightning affinity yet. You don't even know how, you only have the instructions so far for the fire and earth affinity training. Well, he wasn't wrong. He supposed he could look into the fire-style Rasengan first once he got done with them. Or the Meteor Rasengan as it was actually called in the games. Jiraiya had an interesting way of doing it to get around the adding fire element chakra to it. Still, as always it was kind of pitifully sad that at this rate, the element he'd master last, was his actual inborn affinity of lightning. Well, whatever. Daiki stretched out his arms for a moment, before speaking, Senpo. He said, drawing on Isobu's chakra. And a moment later he returned to the backyard of his sweet bachelor pad. Guess I'll go for a shower and get something to eat before I go to meet Anko and the old man. He mused. He made a quick shadow clone and dispelled it a moment later, spreading his new thoughts to all his other clones, before doing just that.